Chapter 211, Choice and Perfect Luck. While Roland was still thinking as hard as he could about his own path, an inconceivable scene was occurring in a plains area far away from his location. It was as if this plains area had transformed into the Chaos Abyss, with large numbers of demons gathering into squads and beginning their hunts. Everywhere that these demon squads went, dangerous earth spiders were dug up, and sand dragons were vanquished instantly like elephants overrun by ants. All these opponents that gave Roland such headaches were meaningless in front of this seemingly limitless demon army. However, these tan-colored chaos demons were rather different from the pure demons of the Chaos Abyss. Compared to their Chaos Abyss relatives that were the representation of evil, not only were these tan demons of a different color, they didn't use the typical fire and acid magic that was the natural talent of the demons, instead using the rather rare earth magic that demons almost never used. All of these tan demons also had incredible physical attack power, as if they were actually the real residents of the earth elemental plane, just like the tough-skinned earth elemental creatures. All types of earth elemental species were vanquished by them. In front of such a large demon army, even the strongest sand dragon could only barely manage to fly a few kilometers before running out of energy and collapsing on the ground. When that sand dragon collapsed on the ground and waited for these twisted creatures to give it the fatal blow, what came instead for it was a sand boat. 4 golden ground dragons were pulling this sand boat. It was just that, judging from their twisted horns and sulfur breath, they were doubtlessly the product of demonized evolution. The sand dragon Sardalayan was already blind in one eye now. Its remaining dragon eye viciously stared in the sand boat's direction. In its mind, what would come out and give it the fatal blow would probably be the leader of all these demons, most likely some veteran demon from the Chaos Abyss. Wow, such a big dragon! But the truth was far different from what the gigantic sand dragon expected. The person that walked out of the sand boat was only a young golden-haired female knight. Judging from her appearance, she was actually a human, and a really young knight at that. Before Sardalayan could attempt to self-destruct himself for a final attack, the female knight suddenly began talking to herself. Alright, I got it, just demonize him, relax. I shall control the chaos, and not be controlled by the chaos. Roar! The angry dragon breath caused a sandstorm to erupt with its destructive attack, but nothing happened at all to the female knight. In fact, the female knight was now already riding on top of Sardalayan's head. Just as Sardalayan was intending to use another attack against her, the pale yellow-colored light of chaos covered him. Although his body was in much pain, he actually began recovering from his wounds, but Sardalayan was now yelping pitifully in shock, because his own skin was now growing demonic scales, barbed poisonous spikes were growing on his back, and his sharp claws and fangs were beginning to elongate and grow thicker, while 2 extra sets of wings appeared on his back. Sardalayan was actually beginning to demonize. Chaos, in the end, is just twisting the rules. Although chaos demons aren't able to be produced naturally, from a certain standpoint, any living creature that has natural laws can be demonized and turned to chaos. However, we dragons don't need to worry about that. We're naturally born with the power to resist against the natural laws. Forcefully demonize us? Not even a demon marquis would be able to do it. Probably only the legendary prince of the Chaos Abyss would be able to do such a thing. Sardalayan's final remnants of consciousness were already going hazy, and he didn't have much time left. He could only mutter this to himself as he recalled his past memories. The princess of the Chaos Abyss. Why is she in such a place? When the pale yellow light faded, that weakened sand dragon had completely vanished. What remained in its place was instead a completely pitch-black gigantic inferno demon dragon. Just its single dusky yellow eye was clear evidence of its identity. Roar! The angrily roaring tremendous dragon opened its new wings and blocked the sandstorm as it began flying towards the next gathering grounds for high-level magical beasts. The newly born demons on the ground also obeyed their master's summons as they headed for the next target location. And on the dragon's back, in the tiny sand boat, Ren seemed to be talking to herself as she asked a question. Teacher Carwins, what will you teach me next? Let's review demonization again, and then let's practice some swordsmanship. From the very start, Roland had made a mistake. As a descendant of the mist, Ren was a passable one, as she would be able to remain resolute and unbroken even in the face of difficulties and failures. The final scene in that snowy night of battle made Roland see his past self in her, but also because of his emotional bias, Roland had overestimated Ren, believing that she could defeat the allure of the chaos abyss all by herself. Sometimes, not giving in to failure and despair and being able to resist temptation were two entirely different things. To give an analogy, it's just like some people with high abilities might not necessarily be of good moral character, and even the resolute might not be able to ignore the temptation right before them, especially when the temptation seemed so wonderful. The demon prince began beguiling Ren instantly after she went off by herself, and the princess knight lived up to Roland's expectations and resisted against the demon's temptations. For a full 5 seconds. Yep, the situation happened something like this. This was how Carwins went about it. Hey, Ren, how about I teach you? Don't listen to Roland, just what could you possibly learn by randomly practicing by yourself? That's no good, Brother Roland said already that I shouldn't listen to you. I'm stronger than he is, so who do you think you should listen to? Besides, your rival is the demon Marchioness, she can KO the current you with a single slap. Please allow me to call you second brother. Okay, before he could even finish, he instantly succeeded in tempting her. Because it was far too easy, even the abyssal Prince Carwins was shocked by Ren's lack of moral constancy. When he heard her reply, he froze over in shock for several seconds before he finally confirmed that she wasn't joking and was being serious. I know that my own personal talent is insufficient. I'm self-aware about that. Before I met Brother Roland, I worked hard as well, but I couldn't even reach the border of silver level. Brother Roland is obviously overestimating me. Besides, I'm Ren, not Roland. I've always believed that there's nothing wrong with power. If I want to be more powerful, why should I care so much about where it's from? The correct answer is obviously to become more powerful first. Ren's words were quite sincere, as that was what she truly believed. She was different from Roland, who could receive more power simply through hard work and effort. She had only ordinary talent and had suffered quite enough already from having insufficient power, and she was already numbed from the feeling of working her hardest but still not seeing any results. From the very start, she knew that she couldn't be like Roland, nor did she intend to force herself to be like him. In this area, after she experienced countless failures and despair, she was actually quite similar to Carwin's, having an almost sick worship of power within herself. If I had power, East Mist wouldn't have been almost destroyed. If I had the power to control my own fate, then Allan's newly rich wouldn't have tried to force me into a marriage and humiliate my tribe. At 13, she had still been a fortunate princess with no worries in the world. At 14, she was already forced onto the battlefield, and now that she was 15, she was already the famous princess knight known throughout the entire Northlands. The trials of fate turned this former flower vase princess into having maturity far beyond her years underneath her seemingly happy outer appearance. She had an endless amount of desire to be able to control her own fate with her own hands. This desire of hers wasn't satisfied one bit even by Roland's arrival. To her teacher Roland, she respected and trusted him. However, she had her own opinion on how to view power. She didn't intend to argue with Roland about this, nor did she want to affect her relationship with Roland due to their differing opinions, but she made her choice with her own decisions. Perhaps, you were already waiting for this day from the moment that you refused Roland's blood. Well, to be able to fool Roland, you have an incredible accomplice. Far away, the accomplice Amelia, who was currently cooking with an oversized magical cauldron, suddenly sneezed. Someone's talking about me? Or cursing me? It's probably that bastard. Beside her was a hole-ridden battlefield. The earth elemental plane that shouldn't have had any greenery actually had a grassy field and forest now. It was just that these gray-yellow plants were actually growing out of the corpses of what had originally been magical beasts. With Amelia's assistance, sealing Ren's bloodline had never been done to begin with, otherwise Carwins wouldn't have been able to contact Ren so easily in the earth elemental plane. In fact, Ren being able to suppress Gleena in all their duels was also mainly due to the power of her bloodline. Perhaps I should apologize to Brother Roland, but I should make my own decisions for my own life. I've already had enough of hiding behind others' backs and shivering. The Roland's sacred sword she was wielding still had its usual silvery holy light, but the Princess Knight's eyes were now turning dark yellow, and the ethereal shadow of a demon was beginning to increase in size behind her, but was also grasped firmly in her hands with a will that was just like iron. Roland had never masked his expectations and worry about the future. Ren, who seemed to always be so casual on the outside, actually had an observant mind and a sensitive heart, and she hated her powerlessness. Even though she was quite clear that making deals with demons was no different from sleeping with tigers, but compared to continuing to be a useless flower vase, even if she fell into depravity in the future, she wouldn't regret the choice she made today. Rather than regretting after the fact about not having seized the opportunity, it's better to just regret later. Isn't this a former famous saying by you? By the way, Brother Roland also has many famous sayings. Carwins, who responded in her soul, was being more serious than his usual self. Then, I shall begin teaching you how to control the chaos. First, you must remember to maintain your sense of self, and never allow the chaos to invade your heart. Power is only a tool, and if you end up being controlled by a tool, that would be too much of a joke. The Chaos Prince was actually teaching someone how to resist against chaos invading the body. Perhaps, in a way, Carwins wasn't treating Ren as a spare vessel for his descent anymore. Perhaps he was truly beginning to treat her as his disciple. I only have one request. Use what I taught you to defeat that Gleena, and teach her a vicious lesson in direct combat. Are you actually that angry that she betrayed your bloodline? I didn't think that you were such a narrow-minded person. HMPH. The feeling she gives me is just like that of Roland from long ago. She's probably already successfully combined with Roland's bloodline. In that case, Roland will definitely teach everything he's ever learned to her, and since you're both my descendant and disciple, how could I possibly allow you to be weaker than Roland's descendant and disciple? Ren came to a realization at this. These powerful figures were always mysteriously serious about weird-seeming subjects. It seemed that the younger twin brother was competing with his older brother. Since they were unable to have a direct competition, then they would simply have an indirect competition with their descendants, disciples. Cousin Gleena? HMPH, I won't lose to her, in any area at all. And so, Ren accepted Carwins's teachings, and unfearingly activated her demonic blood, and then created a gigantic demonized army in the Earth elemental plane. At this moment, when Ren was still learning the secrets of chaos on her dragon's back, a sudden gigantic pillar of light caused violent sandstorms in the entire Earth elemental plane. Just as Ren was about to ask Carwins just what could have happened, she felt a sense of shock and disbelief within herself welling up that came from him. Someone as strong as the Abyssal Prince had actually felt fear at what just happened. Roland, it looks like I underestimated you after all. It seems that the next time we meet, we'll be able to have a really good fight. Of course, I didn't know at the moment that off in the distance, Ren had already created a strong demonic army, which would only become stronger and continue growing in size as time passed. At the time, I had spent all of my energy simply on controlling the earth and water elements to combine. With earth element as the bones, and water element as the bloodline, snow shall fly everywhere, the icy plains shall turn white, and when the wind and snow stop, everything shall be calm. This wasn't any incantation or anything. I was just adding on to the efficiency of my drawing. With its assistance, my homeland scene would reappear in my mind. But this time, just being able to temporarily interfere with my mental world in this world wouldn't be able to satisfy me. My mental world was turning into reality, and I who had turned into the arbitrator was now combining the real and the ethereal, creating a new world with its own inwardly contained cycle. Sidon War's ocean bottle was still giving off magical energy. With the sword seal's assistance, all the water element had been activated, and it was emitting an endless amount of frost. And as for the earth elemental heart, it had long since been transformed into the earth beneath my feet, turning into the first piece of earth for my new world. And what I needed to do was to combine water and earth element into one, moving into the unknown from what I already knew, so that they could enter a self-contained cycle. I took a deep breath, and pointed with one finger at the sky, causing the frosty chill to begin descending, and pointing with another finger at the ground, causing the earth to rise. Then, I took another deep breath, and brought my hands together. Click. There was a sound like gears setting into place. The huge explosion that I expected didn't happen. It combined far easier than I anticipated. Ha, it seems that I was worried for nothing. Eh? Apparently, I was getting happy too early. The very next instant, the two elements that just combined actually began trembling violently, seeming like they were about to come apart and explode. Damn it! If this explodes. The next moment, I imagined a gigantic canyon, but right now, the elemental power backlash was already too much for me to bear, and the elemental power was about to run amok. Everything in theory should be correct, so why did such a situation occur? My power level. Perhaps the famous phrase was correct after all. Right before death, a person's brain would work even better than usual. I instantly realized everything. Yes, while I indeed had the ability for creation, and I had all the correct theories and foundational ideas, but I forgot one thing. When Nike was creating, she already had unimaginable power, and any backlash and chaos would be nothing more than a tiny wave for her. But as for me, that would be an indestructible force I would be completely helpless against. Damn it! There's just one more step to go. How could I possibly feel good about failing at such a time? But everything was about to run amok and I was probably going to die, yet I had no power to resist whatsoever. If only I knew, I would have at least waited until I was at semi-god level to begin trying. What just happened? Suddenly, everything returned to a calm peace, and that explosive elemental power seemed as if it was a domesticated dog, now obeying the tracks I laid out for it. Fate points, 37,624. The system's sudden message informed me about the number of fate points I had, and currently, the fate points were decreasing at a high speed. This was the best evidence of what was behind the miracle that just occurred, and it was also evidence that I had to pay a price for this miracle. 36,521, 31,435, 27,421. It's not like my points grow on trees. Aren't you being too black-hearted? Leave me a few, I still need them to go for gold rank. System reminder, if you still have the time to retort, you should hurry up and end this instead. Fine then, I originally wanted to give it my gratitude for saving my life, but in that case let's forget about it. I spent all my efforts on combining the elements again, and when my damned fate points number reached 9,214, the work was finally completed. Click. It was still the exact same sound of gears falling into place, but only this time, it was likely that the entire plane could hear it. As for me, I could now sense that in this new original world, I now had an isolated piece of sky and earth that belonged only to me. Even though there was nothing but snow, ice, and frozen earth inside it, it was still my personal world. Ding! Congratulations to my host for obtaining the ability Frozen Wintry Earth. Its specific effects and logic by which it works is impossible to analyze by the system, but it's possible to analyze the basic ways to use it. Would you like an analysis? This was the first time I've ever heard of something impossible to analyze, so I immediately nodded as I was overjoyed, but I instantly regretted my decision again. Fate points, 4,624. This instantly used up almost half of my already not many fate points remaining. Just as I was intending to complain, I was shocked by my system's next message. Frozen Wintry Earth, an uncalculatable existence. Its current largest potential area is a spherical space with a radius of 136 meters. It will ignore all barriers of any kind. You can even control it to affect what's underground. Recommended usage 1, Death Chill. Any that enter this frozen area will suffer 1 to 100 ice damage, decided by you. This damage is impossible to mitigate. Even for the gods. Recommended usage 2, Ice River Sword. In all, I actually saw 4 recommended usages for it, but this was only the beginning. These were only part of the effects of this incomplete world. Right after receiving an unexpected joy, of course I would receive bad news next. Right after I was celebrating, I immediately received a critical warning. Warning, due to the low quality of the Earth elemental heart creating the foundation of your world, the Earth's quality is too low. Not only can frozen wintry Earth not be used to its full potential, it's even falling apart. Host, please hurry up and find a replacement material. Time before your world's collapse, 132 days, 6 hours, 10 minutes. Alright, I won't comment on how strong the effects were already, but that it was still only half complete. Nor will I comment on how the Earth Elemental God's Earth Elemental heart was actually treated as too low in quality. The system was even kind enough to give me a pointer arrow, pointed in the direction of the sleeping Earth Elemental God as a hint. It looks like time is going to be of the essence. Immortal Lorcan, just you wait for me. Chapter 212, Great Stone Sculptor. Congratulations to host for promoting to the unique class, Lord of Frigid Winter. This is a personal job class just for you, and it is impossible to pass on to any others. Congratulations to host for entering Gold rank. Congratulations to host for receiving the special isolated dimensional world, Frigid Winter Earth. The system has already prepared camouflage for it. From what the gods can tell, this will only be a rather unique small version of your middle world, and please use it as much as you like. However, if any gods enter it, definitely remember to kill them in order to silence them. Congratulations to host for, the miserly system actually gave me a series of congratulations. This gold rank wasn't a reward from my system either, I had broken through to this rank on my own. Actually, none of these were important to me. What was most important was that I had now confirmed my future path of development. I need to complete and perfect this world. I needed to find god equipment, materials, and divine souls to fill this newly born world vault with. Completing and perfecting this world would mean the same for myself. Perhaps this would be a thorny path, one that would take an incalculable amount of time, and perhaps I might never even finish it in my lifetime. On this path that only I walked, it would be impossible for anyone to give me any advice. But I knew that at the very end of this path I was walking, the treasure that I desired so much might exist. In that case, let's give it a try. I couldn't suppress my excitement and joy. It was as if I was a child who had just received a new toy. I would obviously want to try it out, but I immediately heard another notification from my system at this point in time. Due to the cost of the camouflage system's activation and analysis of these new abilities having surpassed your ability to pay in fate points, please pay an additional 2,147 fate points that you owe within 24 hours. Otherwise, the system shall confiscate your new world. You don't have money? Then let's use your newly born baby to pay off the debt. Pooh. I instantly spurted blood. It actually did this to me at such a time? Give my earlier gratitude and how moved I was back to me. But I had no time to comment on any of this. Based on my understanding of the system, when it said something was good, it might not really be that good, but whenever it said something would be bad, it would definitely be worse than I expected. Since it had already said that it would confiscate my new world if I didn't pay up within 24 hours, then it really would confiscate it by that time. Wait a moment, this is the core of my new job class. If you confiscate it, then won't I become a knight without a horse, a basketball player that doesn't know how to act dramatically to get fouls, a tennis player who doesn't know ultimate techniques, a tofu brain with no sugar to run it with? Won't that be meaningless then? Time remaining, 23 hours, 59 minutes. System reminder, just keep talking about unimportant things and making fun of me, you heretic sweet lover. I decided not to comment any longer and instead began working hard at turning points. The Hellawed Deep Canyon was a forbidden zone in Karo City's map because this was where the Tower Giants resided. Tower Giants didn't sound like a magnificent name at all, but anyone who took a single glance at those enormous stone giants would instantly understand how they got their name. Every tower giant was as tall as a building with several dozen floors, and their heads and shoulders would be obscured by the clouds. Their upper halves were basically fortresses, and their shoulders and heads had the shapes of buildings and were basically the fortress's clock tower and cannon towers. Its tremendous body meant that it had matchless physical attack power, and these tower giants were immensely destructive in melee combat. But the most fatal of all would be the hundreds of catapults within their fortresses. The reasons for such a thing being born were inconceivable. The first pioneers to arrive in the Earth elemental plane had been ambushed by a tower giant, and while they suffered serious losses, they had also mistakenly believed that they were ambushed by an enemy faction's archmage. After all, its specialized body was just like a human structure and made it obvious that it was a created object. Although the tower giants still hadn't evolved to having their own wills, Their incomparably gigantic bodies and countless numbers of huge stone catapults were indisputably the best evidence that they were born to be war machines. And for the Helod Deep Canyon's tower giants to be labeled as the highest danger level of all was because all these tower giants also contained countless numbers of residents within them that formed strange symbiotic relationships with the tower giants. Some of them that lived within the tower giants would be stone peelers or other low intelligence earth elemental creatures. Sometimes one could even find gargoyles or other special flying creatures within. Every tower giant was like a box of chocolates, you never knew what you would find inside it, and finding out would typically never be a good thing. One on top of all that, tower giants even had the habit of living in groups and had a special way to communicate with each other. This meant that fighting with a single tower giant would basically be like fighting an entire war, as several dozens of tower giants would come by and create a tremendous army unit. In the Helod Deep Canyon, the tower giant tribe numbered approximately 400. The exact number of tower giants and symbiotic tribes living with them were impossible to count. Just this tower giant tribe living here in the Helod Deep Canyon made even sand dragons fear to enter this area. Only the most ancient of existences knew that the largest secret was actually within this canyon, and that these gigantic tower giants were only the door guards personally sculpted by a certain ancient existence. Who's that? He's actually heading inside the Helod Deep Canyon? Tower giants would occasionally come out to hunt or roam around. In order to prevent unnecessary losses, every faction established a temporary outpost at the entrance to the canyon. As for Caro's outpost, in addition to keeping a watch on these big guys' movements, their more important duty was to convince newbies to go home instead of going inside. What? A mega SSS rank dangerous zone? HMPH. I was born to do great things. What's a dangerous zone to me? Danger only means it's a place where treasure is hidden and miracles can be found. Ha ha ha. Got equipment and inheritances, I'm coming for you. There are no stairs? Perfect, I'll simply jump off this cliff. Idiots like that would come along every year, and there would always be those who believe too much in heroes' tales. Sometimes, the mages standing guard here would get annoyed and stop trying to convince them, allowing them to enter at their own risk. Luckily, there weren't too many idiots this year. The mage who was in charge here, Kalen, was even worried that there wouldn't be enough funny stories to share when he would finish his shift at the end of the year. When he finally saw someone coming to the Helod Deep Canyon, he was actually rather happy. But before he could go up to that person to warn him about the danger, he stopped of his own volition. That figure, who was wearing a gray cape, merely glanced at him, but he felt as if he had been paralyzed by a lightning strike. He's so strong, I haven't heard of a Thunder Element Archmage that had come here. The next moment, Kalen knew that his good intentions were needless, as that figure had already vanished. The tower giants were under the command to attack all non-earth elemental species. On his way into the canyon, that continuously flashing and vanishing figure was attacked many times, but unfortunately, those clumsy and slow tower giants weren't even able to touch him, much less see him. Once he reached the center of the deep canyon, the gray-cloaked figure stopped, and patiently waited until a voice spoke up. Camdian, what could be so important that you would personally come to find me? Even when dealing with a powerful elemental god, this similarly ancient top-level earth elemental lord had zero hesitation and respect. It was almost as if it was treating Camdian as its junior. Nor did Camdian care about the disrespect, it was rather the opposite, as he preferred being direct as well. Ainslow, would you like to become the earth elemental god? Do you want to become an existence equal to me? Communication between elemental creatures was always ever so direct. They were just like an ancient tribe that lacked any knowledge about modern society. This was all the more so for elemental creatures who hadn't come into much contact with mortals. They always said exactly what they were thinking about. Of course. What do you intend to do? The entire canyon echoed with this tremendous voice. Ainslow didn't even try to hide its own desire. As one of the most ancient existences in the earth elemental plane, Ainslow had been desiring to become the earth elemental god for countless years. But there could only be one earth elemental god. If it weren't for the fact that Ainslow was somewhat intelligent and knew that Immortal Lorcan would be no easy piece of cake to deal with, Ainslow would have long since opened up the seal and fought for the honor to become the earth elemental god. Then, join our plan. This time, the fire elemental goddess, the water elemental goddess, And I have decided to team up and completely destroy Myrtle. That's not enough. After a long hesitation, that was Ainslow's reply. It wasn't that Ainslow was unwilling, it was that Ainslow didn't think that these allies would be able to win. Cambion, who was rejected, wasn't angered at all. This was an answer that he expected. Although Myrtle had angered far too many, he was still alive and kicking after all this time of being attacked by many ganging up on him. There was no other explanation. Myrtle was simply strong enough to the point that he could indeed fight simultaneously with the other three elemental gods at once. In that underground labyrinth, Myrtle was even controlling the opening of the earth elemental dimensional door while facing many as one and even gained the upper hand. If it weren't for the fact that his earth elemental dimensional door met with a problem and he lost much of his power, who knew who would have won in the end? In Ainslow's eyes, just casually joining this allied army against Myrtle would most likely end up in failure, and these outsiders from another plane would simply run off. Ainslow, however, would have to stay behind and face the full wrath of Myrtle, which would be too pitiful. If Myrtle was in perfect condition, of course we would be insufficient, but how about after Myrtle was seriously injured and even forced to self-destruct his divine soul? Don't you feel that it's strange? He's obviously returned to this plane for so long already but hasn't appeared even once, nor has he acted like how he always did in the past, attacking all the most powerful earth elemental lords in order to solidify his own position. Myrtle was injured? For real? How did he get injured? How serious is it? This series of hurried questions indicated just how much Ainslow was convinced and eager to know about this. Of course, I personally witnessed it and even helped injure him. In fact, the earth elemental heart belonging to his body in the mortal plane even became someone else's victory loot. Boom. The underground passage that had suddenly opened up was the best evidence of Ainslow's current attitude. Come in and let's continue our discussion. Ainslow even personally came out to welcome Camdion. Unlike that tremendous voice that rattled the ears, Ainslow was actually an incredibly short elemental creature. Its ugly skin was filled with black scales, while its mottled head was filled with sharp earth elemental crystals. Ainslow's forelimbs were rather short, and its eyes were quite ugly. Just judging by physical appearance, Ainslow was quite close to a gnome's. But Camdion would never underestimate her just because of physical appearances. Ainslow was the creator of many strong earth elemental creatures, including all the tower giants. The great stone sculptor Ainslow also had the beautiful title of Mother of 10,000 Stones. That's right, her, not him. While elemental creatures didn't have genders to begin with, after reaching a high enough level, they could choose their own genders. As one of the most ancient elemental lords in the earth elemental plane, Ainslow's fame and might was no lower than the elemental gods. If it weren't for the fact that Myrtle was ridiculously strong, she actually had power on par with the other elemental gods. At the very least, if Ainslow had been a wind elemental lord, Camdion himself felt that he didn't have any guaranteed chances of victory against her. This time, we have a grand plan. In order to ensure its success, two of us elemental gods have personally joined in, and I've even recruited 30-something earth elemental lords, and they're all very interested in this plan. Of course, that also means that they're interested in the treasured position of earth elemental god. As long as Myrtle is eliminated, I won't lose to anyone. Camdion faintly smiled and didn't say anything more. He had already heard this type of phrase more than 30 times in the past few days. Every single earth elemental lord would say that to him. As long as Myrtle is eliminated, I will steal the position of earth elemental god for myself. There were no promises given. These ancient existences didn't need promises either, as all of them were filled with self-confidence. They also knew that the moment Myrtle died for real, all promises would be worth nothing more than blank paper, and in the end the earth elemental lords would have to decide things among themselves based on real strength. This was also why Roland had Camdion take the task of personally coming out to convince the earth elemental lords. Normal people wouldn't even be able to receive a chance to speak before these ancient existences. Only the similarly ancient wind elemental god would know how to get all these ancient existences to temporarily ally and work together for the same cause. Then, please take a look at this blueprint. In order to deal with Myrtle, we need a fortress, a huge moving fortress. Ainslow accepted the blueprint, and then, I haven't read many books, But you can't fool me. Is this really a fortress? Do you think I've never been to the mortal plane? This is obviously just a duck. Yep, on that blueprint was a large yellow duck, albeit without a neck. And on the top of the blueprint, there were also several large words that were written. Moving fortress, large yellow duck. This was obviously the blueprint of a certain individual who had spent so much hard effort on designing it. Fine, you can also say that it was the product of terrible hobbies. No, I didn't understand it at first either, but you see, making it into a bird's shape is in order to reduce air resistance while it's flying, and choosing the strange shape of a featherless, necklace duck is all in order to have better contours for less drag. Apparently, this is supposed to be humanity's newest technology in the area of air resistance. It's the crystal of scholarly wisdom. Are you sure that you're not joking with me? This is a crystal of scholarly wisdom, not some random object made by someone with too much free time? It was obvious that Hainslow wouldn't be so easy to fool. She had a premonition that with just this ridiculously laughable outer appearance alone, if she ended up creating it, it would become the greatest humiliation of her long life. Of course, the one who designed it was a major scholar of the Truth Research Society, Margaret, and this time, she's also personally joining us in the attack on Lorcan. Alright, Camdion didn't intentionally lie to Ainslow. It was Roland who had fooled Camdion about its designer to begin with. But now, the Wind Elemental God's words sounded extremely convincing. Even though Ainslow still felt rather confused and doubtful inside, she could only agree. Wake up all those stone carvers and sculptors, we have a new job. Let us begin creating the large yellow duck. Under the lead of the great stone sculptor, it shall become the grandest duck in this entire world. Note: 1. Forrest Gump reference. Chapter 213, The Former Student. The main gods, whoops, I meant the system wouldn't give me a quest where I'd die for certain. I really wanted to say this, but to be honest, I still didn't know how to earn 2,000-something fate points within 24 hours. This was more than half a year's worth of daily quests. But where there's a will, there's a way. I really wanted to say that as well, but the so-called way never ended up arriving. Time's up. I'm now going to confiscate your newborn baby. Whenever you have enough points, come find me. Interest will be set at 40% with compound interest, if you take too long. Hey, you understand? The hell's with saying I understand. How much do you want to overuse this joke? But, even so, there was no helping the situation. What else was I supposed to do other than earn enough fate points? Alright then, my current target was to now hurry up, complete my quests, and pay off the fate points I owed as quickly as possible. However, my current condition obviously wasn't the best for challenging strong opponents. And so, there was no helping it. After having set out for less than a week's time, I began my return journey. I decided to hurry back to Cairo City first. At the very least, I needed to think of how to pay off my debt and receive my newborn baby back again. Daily quests, pick one of two. The first quest is to tell the world that I am a naked king. The second quest is this uncle isn't a pervert. Little girl, why don't you watch this goldfish together with your uncle? As I walked through Cairo's streets and looked at my daily quests, it seemed to be a choice between making either myself or others suffer. Yet looking at the 50-point reward, which probably wouldn't even be enough to pay off the interest, I gave up immediately. Messing up the original planned course and fate will be profitable. I should just find an epic ranked quest somewhere and complete it. I crouched on the street and observed the busy people around me as I thought to myself, Roland, it was actually you. When the scouts said that you returned, I couldn't believe it. The person who suddenly interrupted my contemplation of important life questions was a white-bearded fellow with an excited face. I tilted my head at seeing this wrinkly old face who was so excited that his face had gone red all over. Oh, Are you that meat pie selling old man from Rubber Street? You're here looking for the 2 copper coins I owe you. Pooh. Judging by how he fell on the street, in addition to the looks of the relatively young mages following him, it seemed that my guess was off the mark. The hotel owner? The shoe polisher right in front of where I lived? The barber next door? You're none of the above. You must be kidding. Just who exactly are you? I was starting to get rather frustrated. My time was quite valuable, and this white-bearded fellow actually dared to play guessing games with me. You don't recognize me, And you're getting angry with me? I'm Cade, a junior student from the same time as you. Take a closer look. At hearing this, I paused in surprise. I could indeed recall such a junior student, but he obviously had a different appearance. That's not right. Cade doesn't have such a large beard, and he was a handsome young fellow back in the day who was quite white. Nor was he as short as you. The white-bearded fellow kept nodding. Yep, I'm that white Cade from back then, who used to be famous for being handsome, who all the teachers were attracted to. But now that I'm old now, how could I possibly look like back then? My back's a little hunched now, which is why I'm shorter. You're really Cade? That Cade who specialized in divination and prophecy? The Cade who would fail his elemental magic classes until Armageddon? The Cade who wouldn't wash his underwear for 2 weeks at a time? The Cade who used fire magic to make fireworks for confessing to a girl and ended up being treated as the younger brother type? Alright, the more I spoke, the redder Cade's old face got, but he didn't deny anything I said. Yep. Didn't you also fail classes together with me? That silly public confession idea even came from you, and as for not washing my underwear for 2 weeks, isn't that your fault for exploding the laundry room? I nodded at this. It seemed that it actually did match up with my memories, but I still wanted to confirm something. You really are Cade, the Cade who chose to specialize in divination just so you could secretly spy on female teachers changing clothes and taking showers. This time, the two students behind him looked at their teacher with strange looks in their eyes. To them, the myth-ranked mage Cade was a venerated, kindly elder who was easy to get along with. They never expected Cade to have such a wild history. That was Phillips. You definitely remembered wrong. I'm not interested in older women, I only like the younger ones. Oh. It was too late to stop now. The commotion from his students made the old teacher want to find a hole somewhere to hide in. I had now confirmed things. However, you really are Cade, that's great. Archmage Cade was smiling with tears in his eyes. Being able to see an old friend again after so many years was indeed rather moving. Return my money. Those 3.5 gold coins that you owe me. When do you intend to pay me back? 40% compound interest, plus 200 years time. I'll just calculate it as 200,000 gold coins. Everyone's expressions froze over instantly upon hearing this. Demons from the 9 depths, please listen to my prayers. Fine, this guy actually started cursing me, and it seemed like a mega-level magic spell that borrowed powers from the demons. I knew that my joke had gone a little overboard, so I jokingly explained myself. Getting angry so quickly, you really are Cade. Come. We should find a place to drink a little as fellow brothers. There were 4 great joys in life: meeting with rain after a long drought, the first night after being newlywed, becoming famous for your accomplishments, and meeting an old friend in a distant land. There were also 4 great sorrows in life: only having 1 drop of rain, the groom being someone else, writing the wrong name on the test, and meeting a debtor in a distant land. But, right now, Cade, who seemingly owed me money, was quite happy. After drinking some alcohol, he even joyfully went looking for some young girls and asked, "How about letting this grandfather show you some Western tricks? Look, lollipops. Look, goldfish." And then he was dragged away by his disciples. Today, Cade's impression of being strict and archaic was probably utterly ruined. Perhaps, starting from tomorrow, stories of the old Cade's new fierceness would be told all over the city. Oh my! Even though this is just some free alcohol, it's still pretty good. This should be the Allen District's special 300-year-old brandy. Its price should be at least 5,000 gold coins. You're really willing to go all out. HMPH, don't think that you can buy me with money. You still need to return my money to me. System reminder, you bastard, can't you just stop bringing up those 3.5 gold coins of yours? Also, you remembered it wrong. There weren't even any gold coins back in that time, it was obviously just 3.5 copper coins. You should learn from Cade here. See, he's forgotten entirely about it, and he's even agreed to pay for your room and board. Copper coins? Forget it, there's no difference. You should also forget about the fate points I owe you, then I'll never mention these coins again. Alright then, the system didn't answer me, but my guess was that that bastard of a system was probably preparing some sort of glorious achievement like Scrooge for me. And right now, Cade returned in joyous spirits. Yep, We should just ignore the tiny handprint on his cheek. It seemed that little girls wouldn't care if he was some venerated archmage and would still slap him. Roland, why are you drinking by yourself? It's such a rare celebration party, you should be happier. This is also where I want to introduce you to the others as an old senpai, you should at least give me some face here. Don't mention it. Just look at how they're all pointing, no need to mention face, they probably all think that I'm just an old demon. You don't say, it truly is strange. Although after reaching a certain level, the physical body will indeed become nearly indestructible, and the rate of aging will drastically slow, but for you, not only your physical body but even your soul feels like it's filled with energy, as if you're a newly born baby. And, your current magic power doesn't feel strong. I smiled without answering. Some things were too difficult to explain even if I wanted to. Cade shook his head, knowing I didn't want to say anything, and he didn't pry any further as he began chatting about the past. Did you still remember Ryulu? She actually got married to Kaso, our fellow student. I had forgotten many things already, but luckily, divine power helped me recover quite a few memories of the last god's descent. Plus, I had the records from my experimental log, so I could mostly match those to my memories. Of course, some confusion was still unavoidable. For example, misremembering a beautiful lady as a handsome boy, misremembering me owing money as me being owed money, or misremembering copper coins as gold coins. System, can you stop bringing up those 3.5 gold coins already? Cough. Getting back to the main topic, after getting old like me, mentioning past events would always be nostalgic and long-winded. This chat took up half the entire night. Except for a few of us, all the others had left already. After chatting about so many things, even I felt rather nostalgic upon hearing about my past classmates and friends' news. Time was cruel and would never stop ticking. With 200 plus years having passed, the number of classmates I had that were still alive weren't many. After all, gold was an obstacle, legend was another obstacle, and saint was yet another obstacle. In order to reach the limit of human life, one must reach at least the saint rank, and the probability of that was absolutely minuscule. Oh right, did you still remember Teacher Amelia? Cade smiled mysteriously, as if he had finally found my weak spot. Back when you were together with her, many archmages were sad to the point of despairing, and there were quite a few that used your image as a voodoo doll. She's still looking for you, and won't believe at all that you're dead, and she's always been single. It seems that she's deeply in love with you, so how do you intend to pay her back? I didn't react much to this, but Atadia and Sorrento beside us were obviously shocked and exclaimed out loud. They had kept worrying that their teacher Cade would continue to embarrass himself, but they never expected to hear about a topic like this. Impossible. The gentle and kind teacher Amelia was the dream woman for a countless number of students, how could she possibly? What? I'm the Angelic Amelia Supporters Club member number 1047, this definitely can't be real. Teacher, you're going to face the wrath of all us innumerable Amelia fans. Slap. Cade awkwardly smiled at me after he slapped both his students on the back of their heads to shut them up. You're actually tempted by physical appearance, how immature. After those taboo things occurred, Amelia indeed had an infamous reputation, but with the passage of 200 plus years, as long as those old fellows kept quiet about things, not many knew about Amelia's past. In the students' eyes, they probably only saw that astonishingly charismatic teacher Amelia who seemed so gentle and easy to get close to. Who was it clutching my thigh and crying that year long ago, and then running off while still crying and shouting, "I'll leave Amelia to you, you have to treat her well, or I'll never forgive you in my life." This time, it was Cade's turn to break out into a cold sweat. The next moment, he adjusted his beard and changed to a serious expression. That was Alibert. It was definitely that fellow. He was one of the biggest Amelia fans around back in the day. Okay then, seeing that Cade was treating me to 300-year-old brandy, I decided to somewhat save his face. So, Teacher Cade had this side to him as well back in the day. Why are you saying that we're being tempted by physical appearances? Could it be that Teacher Amelia also has another side to her, a wild, seductive side? Ah, I really want to see that side. One was exclaiming while the other one was panting. It was obvious that none of these guys could be considered normal. Kate and I could only exchange glances and smile wryly at the younger generation's fascination with Amelia. It was similar to how we were fooled that year as well. Wild, more like insane. Believe me, if you ever saw her other side, you'd likely be on her experiment table, and then there wouldn't be anything else left for you. After some hesitation, I still decided to tell them. Actually, Amelia found me, and we came to the Earth elemental plane together this time. Teacher Harlois is also together with us. After I said this, Gade was still fine, but the two Amelia fans' eyes turned red and seemed like they were about to jump me. However, Cade revealed an expression of deep contemplation. He knew that the Earth elemental plane was no place to be going on a honeymoon, and all three of us were considered world-class calamities, so we definitely had some kind of reason for coming here. Then, he connected the dots to the recent strange occurrences, and now revealed an expression of sudden realization. Could it be that the increase of the Earth elemental tide and the inability to teleport between dimensions were caused by you guys? Teleportation between dimensions isn't working anymore? No, we didn't cause that, but it's highly likely to be related to our goal. You know about Immortal Lorcan, right? As the Earth Elemental Lord, he's probably the only one who can seal off this entire plane. The elemental tide's increase is definitely related to him. Immortal Lorcan? Last I heard, didn't he go to the Northlands to join up with the Beastmen? Your news is behind by at least half a year. He's returned, and he's seriously injured. This time, we came here for something big. Would you like to join us? Congratulations to host for activating a legend ranked quest, and a reminder from the system. HMPH, it's definitely not because I'm taking pity on you that I'm giving you a quest that can help you pay off your debt. Stop sinisterly pretending to be cute, you're as uncute as could be. Chapter 214, Contract and Teaching. To be honest, I was actually quite happy to meet a familiar face in a distant land, especially since he owed me money and even promised to return it with interest. System, have you had enough of this topic yet? Will it ever end? Comic off, let me get to the main point. I finally didn't need to swindle those gnomes to earn a living anymore. After all, they weren't exactly dumb, and they weren't easy to deal with. The gnomes' hard efforts, however, had another effect, which was that the law god Woomians' belief system was spread far and wide. Of course, it was impossible to think about relying on them to actually propagate religion. Even if the concept of law was very useful to the gnomes who were individually weak, they were a group that would do anything for money, always on the border between legal and illegal. Why would they ever do something so troublesome as spreading religion? What they spread for Woomians was something else, but it was something that belonged to one of his concepts, contracts. This divine obligation that Woomians obtained at all and wasn't widely accepted in human society yet, but the gnomes were happily making use of contracts. That insurance was obviously a type of contract, and the gnomes were quite welcoming of this new concept that would protect the weak and was supported by the power of a true god. There was just a small problem. Venerated insurance god, Bushuas, please listen to my prayers, and help me sell some extra insurance today. Forget about getting the god's name wrong, the insurance god wouldn't be the merchant god either, but why would he have to help you succeed in sales? Cough. I meant, what's with calling him the insurance god? There was actually no divine punishment for this. Was Woomian such an easygoing god? That was impossible. Luckily, the gnomes got the god's name wrong, so the prayers would be ineffective. Otherwise. Alright, somebody had already stated the truth. A prayer like this, which got the god's name wrong, was just like a wrong number phone call, completely meaningless. However, this would definitely anger anyone in a divine job class related to the god in question if they witnessed something so blasphemous. Yet, sometimes, even the wrong could have the same effect as the correct. If certain wrong concepts gathered to a certain degree, it really would have the power to affect a true god's divine obligation. In order to prevent Woomians from being addressed by incredibly uncool names like the insurance god or Bushuas in the future, I intended to have the Church of Law take action right after I returned to the mortal plane. At the very least, I couldn't allow the gnomes to act as they pleased like this anymore. Perhaps it was time for me to attempt trying my hand at something as profitable as insurance. Right now, The contracts under the name of the law god were doubtlessly far better than the contracts with demons. Furthermore, in order to give these contracts greater effectiveness, those miserly gnomes actually even constructed a temple of the law god in Karo City, and Wumian's statue was even golden. Yep, gold paint only, as they would never want to spend their lovely gold on something as useless as decoration. Although I greatly objected to the fact that more and more gnomes were treating Wumians as the insurance god, I had to admit that they were rather helpful in expanding the law god's divine obligation and divine domain, even if they had selfish objectives in spreading contracts and insurance. I suppose it counted as doing good while having bad intentions. Perhaps I should have a discussion with the gnomes and sign an overall contract with them, adding a clause for them to spread the complete religion of the law god. With their abilities to even come to other planes and be merchants, I'm certain that they could be effective. As I was thinking to myself, I suddenly imagined a scene of a gnome wearing a gentlemanly hat and a suit, politely knocking on someone's door and handing that person a name card. "Hello, do you happen to know about Wumians? You don't? That's great. Whoops, I mean that's really regrettable. Our Church of Wumians. If you join us now, we'll even give you a free present, 3 years worth of accident insurance. For free. If you pay 100 gold coins, we can even give you VIP membership and add on explosion insurance for no extra cost." Just imagining this scary scene becoming a reality made me feel like all the divine job class members of the Church of Law would be equated with common salesmen. I decided to give up on this idea of mine so that Wumians wouldn't turn into the advertising god of dandruff. But the most important thing right now was, when will the system return my world to me? While I didn't activate a legend quest, which it would indeed give me a significant amount of points, the surprising part was that it wasn't about killing off Imrita Lorcan. Instead, it was a choice between the battle of two dragons. I could choose between helping either the Bardi Empire or the Mage Country, and improve my reputation in one of the two countries. Obviously, if I chose the Mage Country and dragged them into this affair with me, then it would be quite useful to improve my reputation through this battle against Imrita Lorcan. The reward was the large number of fate points that I needed, and if I chose the method of killing Imrita Lorcan in order to improve my reputation, then there would also be a significant reward of highest quality earth element materials for constructing my perfect world. But I wasn't happy about this quest at all, because this quest's choice implied something obvious. The Mage Country and Bardi Empire are at war? At hearing this, Cade nodded with a bitter expression. Although it hasn't broken out into all-out war yet, over 100 conflicts have erupted on the border in the past month. Every day, we capture several hundred spies. It's also quite obvious with their military movements. It would seem that it's only a matter of time before Bardi formally declares war. Just what is Orlos 13 thinking? Having his mega-level empire begin a war right before the Holy War? Did a demon devour his brain? I didn't even have to ask the reason, as I understood the Truth Research Society quite well. As long as their system didn't change, they would have little interest in things like reputation or expanding their country. The Mage Country hadn't changed its boundaries in the past several thousands of years, and it was basically impossible for me to believe that they would start a war of their own volition. As for the Bardi Empire, to be honest, the human mega-level empires were all the same, incredibly arrogant, and if any mental nutcases arrived that believed themselves to be some legendary once-in-a-thousand-years king, the countries next to them would suffer for the next 100 years. The biggest issue of all was that all these empires happened to have incredibly solid foundations, and it would be quite difficult for any other country to deal with them. Thankfully, there were numerous small countries between the major countries as a buffer zone. But I had heard of that Torlos 13 before. He had already been the Bardi Emperor for 30 plus years, and was always a warmonger through this entire time. He kept fighting wars with other countries, and he recently beat the Moon and Horn 13 countries alliance into submission and forced their surrender, which directly removed the buffer zone between the Bardi Empire and the Mage Country. I doubt that he's insane. He probably saw that all the other countries were busy preparing for the Holy War, so they could take this opportunity to expand. HMPH. They really believe they'll be spared in the Holy War? Foolish. Cade shook his head at hearing this. Bardi is an interior kingdom. There's basically no other species but humans both inside their borders and in the nearest countries. This holy war really might not affect them too much. Our mage country is too much of a big target, and they're probably targeting our technology. It really is rather bothersome. I opened my mouth, but didn't say anything in the end. After all, it was impossible for me to explain how I knew about the fact that the undead plane had a portal that would open right in the Bardi Empire's capital. If I casually let it be known, it would cause me an endless amount of trouble, and there was no way for me to prove that history and the future would be repeated. It should be worth mentioning that when I had used the name of the Eastern Mist communal country to warn the human countries about how the undead would soon invade, basically nobody believed it, and the only response was disbelief and ridicule. Those northern hicks say that an undead calamity is about to arrive. Hee hee, it seems they've already been scared witless by the remnants of Zayuo's forces. Let the undead calamity come. Even the Yong'ai calamity from approximately 100 years ago couldn't do anything to us, so why would this be any different? East Mist, that Roland from the legends, warning us about a new undead calamity like Yong'ai. Oh my! Isn't this the rat warning the cat about a robber? Are you sure that this isn't just a joke? Alright, I did what I could, and I couldn't control things if they weren't willing to listen. But now, it was obvious that I had to make a decision. The mage country. There's no need to even think about it. I'm already sick and tired of foolish emperors, those bastards. And after I made a choice, that evil system of mine actually gave me something useful, allowing me to temporarily borrow my world up to 3 times. It even gave me a progress bar. 11.7%, minus 3,421, the second number was the number of fate points I owed, which kept increasing in no apparent pattern. The first one was incomprehensible. No matter what or how I asked, the system remained abnormally silent. And the moment that progress bar increased in number even a little, my debt would grow tremendously. Not at a 40% interest rate at all. I could only helplessly experiment one time with my world, which instantly helped me understand, and then I instantly regretted it. I had wasted one of my few chances that were difficult to come by. My world was still empty as it started out, and the air in it was still frosty, but something seemed to be new within it. At the very least, it seemed far more stable than before. My system has changed its ways. It's decided to become its own dear one. It actually helped me out. If my guess is right, it's helping me complete and stabilize my world. It's even allowing me to go into debt. When it came to receiving payments, the system was quite reliable. It was always adamant in not doing anything for me unless it was paid, never working for free at all, and keeping true to the principle of working only as hard as the amount it was paid. This time, the fact that it was willing to allow me to go into debt while helping me out was rather astonishing. The system fell into an abnormal state of silence. Not only did it ignore everything I asked it, I couldn't even open up anything in its menu except the progress bar. It was basically like a computer that had overloaded itself and crashed. But from another aspect, it also meant how important the world was, important to the point where the system abandoned everything else and focused only on perfecting it. But not being able to use the system didn't mean that I had nothing to do. It was rather the opposite. In order to improve my reputation for the quest, as well as prepare for the necessary upcoming battle, I did many small things. Karo City's arena was typically the place where other species would take care of their personal grudges, and the wise mages would never enjoy such a barbaric stage. Yet these days, the arena was filled to the brim with mages. Currently, a silver-armored warrior was dueling with an archmage. The archmage kept creating walls in an attempt to prevent the warrior from getting into melee range, while he also controlled some earth elemental warriors as fodder for blocking the silver warrior. Boom! The earth wall that would have been sufficient to block even a giant was actually demolished, and all that silver warrior had to do was lower his head and guard himself with his shield, and he could completely ignore the low-level earth elementals his opponent summoned. Boom! This time, a newly created earth wall was directly destroyed as its earth element wasn't solidified enough yet. It was unexpected. The archmage was still in the midst of an incantation when the silver warrior's sharp sword was already in front of him. He hurriedly rose his hand in surrender as his face was already pale with fear. Winor, Roland, congratulations for 17 victories in a row. I took off my helmet and smiled my hashtag 59th style Holy Knight standard smile, which I was out of practice with these days, and waved my hand at the observers, causing many to shout out in excitement and joy. It seems that I still have it in me. As a Holy Knight who used to specialize in being the pretty face to attract sponsors, using my face to improve my reputation was basically a piece of cake for me. But just this alone wouldn't be enough. And, so, I was all smiles as I reached out my hand to the Archmage that just lost to me. I pulled him up and began explaining to him about the battle just now. Using well-prepared earth wall traps to slow down a high-speed type warrior is indeed a good idea, but sometimes it's just too obvious. If only you placed a small trap for tripping someone under the earth wall. As long as it succeeds in making your opponent lose balance, even for just a short moment, that could be fatal. And all you focused on was creating walls. Can't you dig a pit trap with earth magic behind the wall? Since your opponent's vision will be blocked by the earth wall anyways, when a high-speed type warrior breaks through the earth wall or jumps over it, he'll have too much speed to stop, and it's highly likely that he'll fall directly into the pit. Oh. Not only was this Archmage not unhappy about losing, he was nodding with an expression filled with gratitude. The other spectator mages also took out their notebooks and kept writing in them. These types of combat techniques and practical experience all came from a strong warrior's experience and couldn't be learned in any classroom. Scholarly academic mages always have a bad habit of preferring to use extravagant high-level spells to crush their opponents. To tell the truth, high-level spells have too long of a cast time and are too obvious. They aren't actually all that threatening to high-level warriors. As long as you hit someone in a critical area, even the lowest level ice arrow can be fatal. A simple combination of low-level magic spells is the best combination to deal with high-level warriors. Yep, I was teaching them after every battle, and this was the method I chose to try improving my reputation. After all, in the Mage Society, there were plenty who could teach magical knowledge, but there were pitifully few mage teachers who could teach combat experience and practical techniques. Yep, I was now a mage teacher. Even though in combat I typically performed the role of a warrior job class, I had appeared in front of them as a magical swordsman who practiced both swordsmanship and magic, which was why they could accept me as one of their own. Since it was a mage defeating them, they could accept it even if they lost. But a warrior defeating mages continuously would doubtlessly give me a lot of unnecessary trouble. As a former student who was senior to even their highest ranked Archmage Cade, I naturally counted as their teacher in their eyes as well, which further reduced any enmity they may have had. And since I was considered an ancient oddity who had lived for several hundred years already, no matter how ridiculous I acted, they would treat it all as normal. May the holy light forever be by your side. A blinding holy light descended and began healing the Archmage that had just lost to me. His skin began glowing pink, but all the spectator mages didn't react to this. This obviously wasn't the first time. This is the 13th time he's used holy magic to heal his opponent. Could this senior of ours even have the job class of a legend holy knight? Inconceivable. Without a doubt, the good reputation of holy knights would also make it much easier for me to gain reputation. At the very least, the story of my adventuring that I had made up was already being treated as real. And if everyone else was just somewhat surprised, Cade was shocked to the point of his jaw dropping on the ground. The greedy, perverted, narrow-minded, vicious, evil, grudge-bearing, 30 adjectives have been skipped here for convenience. Roland was actually able to become a holy knight? Are the rumors of the god of holy light going blind actually true? Alright, so you think I'm greedy, perverted, 34 adjectives skipped here for convenience? Yep, Cade, you must have a really good memory as well. Yep, in 2 days, I shall allow you to witness just how grudge-bearing I'm capable of being. Good work. Those youngsters are really impressed with you. Cade, just keep being happy for the time being. I'll help the whole city learn that you're actually a lolicon. I was intending to tease him with that, but suddenly, a messenger came in on a horse galloping at top speed. Judging by how the messenger was waving his hand at me, it seemed that the letter I had been waiting for all this time had finally arrived. Cade, it seems that the time has come. Our plan is about to begin. Note 1. According to Wikipedia, Tsundere is a Japanese term for a character development process that describes a person who is initially cold and even hostile towards another person before gradually showing a warmer side over time. Chapter 215, Divine Miracle. Caro's skies were always a yellowish gray, and every day, endless sandstorms would rage against the city's barrier. Although the residents of the city didn't need to prepare against the wind and sand like they would need to if they were outside the barrier, it was only natural that the city's skies would darken as long as there was a sandstorm outside. At such a time, Caro City's magical lights would all be lit, but Caro could no longer afford to use such a luxurious, resource-consuming item when supplies were limited, as the Earth elemental plane was recently cut off from the mortal plane. So, whenever the sandstorms occurred, the entire city would be pitch dark and everyone would only be able to stay home and sleep. This was only a small part of how terrible this environment was. Since the Earth elemental plane lacked vibrant colors, this world seemed too simple, and in order to prevent psychological problems, according to the Mage Country's rules, the head Archmage in Caro was supposed to be switched out every 3 years. Yet, with this sudden incident of the teleportation between planes no longer working, Cade, who was in charge, was destined to remain for quite some time. Currently, however, in this world that only had the simple colors of black, gray, yellow, and brown for the most part, there was now a different color, a patch of endless white. Frosty ice was filling Roland's temporary guest room. The ice crystals spread all the way to the corridor, but there was a gap in the center of where the ice gathered, where the Knight of Ice was currently retracting his ice magic. Phew. I've finally gotten used to it. This death chill spell that I've newly mastered is definitely a lot more useful than the frost spell. Now, my next target shall be learning the Ice River Sword. Of course, I would never be a teacher for free like that. To be honest, I also needed a large amount of actual combat to get used to my new abilities. My frigid winter earth was confiscated and maintained by my system, and I couldn't use most of its abilities, but there were still 2 abilities that remained and were evolved forms of my original abilities. Just mastering them alone took up much of my time and energy. Even right when it awakened, my frost spell had already proved its potential. Its unmitigatable damage and its capability to be endlessly stacked were akin to the original nature of winter, but its greatest weakness was that it required physical contact to activate. At the time, there had been an additional explanation on it saying that it would evolve when I reached the gold rank. Now, it had indeed evolved into Death Chill, a strange area of effect ice damage ability. It wasn't limited to that. Every tick of ice damage would decrease the enemy's ice resistance level. I performed some experiments and found that an unprepared gold-ranked mage would need about 30 seconds for him to be sleeping with ice cubes forevermore. Simply speaking, this chill inherited the same effects of frost to stack limitlessly and cause unmitigatable damage, and I felt that I would even be able to freeze an ice dragon to death if the battle extended long enough. Since this ability was connected to my frigid winter earth, it seemed that even the true gods would be unable to ignore this ice damage that was seemingly rather low. This was doubtlessly a strong ability and would perhaps become the core of my future combat strategies. As long as I wore some heavy armor, I was already an outstanding Tinkin Knight. Add on support abilities like Holy Healing, and it quickly became obvious I had the advantage in sustained, drawn-out battles. My recent duels against the mages were evidence of how abnormally powerful my new ability was. They would be halfway through chanting a spell when they would suddenly be interrupted by a cough, or their well-prepared defense barrier would suddenly become useless. Weak pieces of ice. The advantages became even more obvious while fighting against other melee opponents. The closer the opponent got to me, the greater the power of Death Chill. After exchanging blows, my opponent would start getting bothered by the ice crystals that would form on his sword. It was evident that my Death Chill wouldn't spare sword wielders. Although I still needed to find more uses of this ability, these functions alone were sufficient for me to deal with the average legend. The most important was that this ability wouldn't be affected by this world. If I could even use my ability to the fullest in the earth elemental plane where the water and ice elements were incredibly rare, I would probably be able to use it in other true gods' divine domains as well. Yet some people had some objections to me. Hey, back in the day, wasn't it you who said that warriors were all muscles and no brains? How come you went and leveled up in a job class that you previously called barbaric? With old friends who know all about your past, especially your dark history, you wouldn't be able to help feel rather helpless, just like I was at the moment. When faced with such a sarcastic inquiry, I really didn't know how I was supposed to respond. It's a long story. Right, did the Mage Country reply? Yep, we barely managed to get in contact. Although the transmission lasted for only a few sentences, the Truth Symposium's reaction was quite quick, and they gave us some good news. Basically, I have full authority to deal with this sudden situation, which means whatever I say, goes. Cade was chuckling in delight as he said so. In a way, this also indicated the Mage Country and Truth Symposium's trust in him. They viewed him as important. This was to be expected. I nodded and didn't say anything, but Cade kept laughing. By the way, they also transported a small present for you. Just a little something. A present for me? I should have left that year without saying goodbye. I had run off instantly after reporting Amelia, so how could there possibly be a present for me? Your graduation diploma. Congratulations. After over 200 years, you finally graduated and can go look for a job now. By the way, you've also broken the records at our school for how long you've failed the same grade and for being a truant. Fine then, that sky blue booklet really did have my name Roland written on it, and it even had the Truth Symposium's emblem stamped on top. I didn't know whether to be angry or to laugh, but that was when I came to a sudden realization. You're saying that some things, you only need to think and not say out loud. Oh, by the way, remember to thank our teacher Aluso, as he even went through the trouble of getting you a special teaching certificate. This seemed like an unimportant joke, but it was the recognition that the Mage Country was giving me. A student who forgot his graduation diploma when he left would no longer be an outsider, and now that I was officially recognized as a former student, even a teacher, I now had an identity as a member of the Mage Country. Taking command of these juniors here would be only national with this new identity of mine. Teacher Aluso? That nice fellow who's an ice magic specialist. Okay, got it. To pay him back, I'll write and give him a copy of the Icean spell. You really were young after all. Forget it. Everyone has their own troubles, and I won't mention it. In that case, I'll thank you on Teacher Aluso's behalf for the time being. After all, this is the only forbidden spell developed for ice magic in the past 300 years. Even if more than 99% of mages won't be able to learn it, it's still nice to improve the stock of our library. After the message arrived from the Mage Country, all of Cairo got busy with preparing for battle against Imridalorcan. After all, every mage was worried about their country's upcoming war against the Bardi Empire, and they all wanted to take care of the trouble before them as quickly as possible so that they could return to their homeland and protect their country. After Cairo began its preparations, some other local factions like Shadow Tower and Hand of Tizo that had good relations with Cairo also accepted our invitation and joined in, making full preparations for combat. I was also patiently waiting for this destined battle. Imridalorcan, I still remember the death you wrought at Red Maple Castle like it was yesterday. It's time for your reckoning. In a way, an elemental plains elemental god counted as the plains master. Countless elemental creatures would be under the god's management, and only incredibly strong elemental creatures would be able to resist the god's summoning. That's why, from the very start, this was going to be an incredibly dangerous large-scale battle. Therefore, in order to deal with that nearly endless amount of elemental cannon fodder at Imridalorcan's disposal, we also needed to prepare a sufficient amount of cannon fodder, separated by type. Each member of my small team was also giving it their all. Normal wind and water elemental creatures would essentially be useless here, which was why Camdian had been spending his time tricking the elemental lords here into becoming cannon fodder. Those ambitious existences had long since been unsatisfied with Imridalorcan's rule, especially after he had been sealed for such a long time. Now, he hadn't shown up after he obviously returned, and there were even rumors that he was seriously injured to the point of death. Of course he wouldn't seem as scary as he usually did. The new generation of Earth Elemental Lords were all the ambitious type, and they had long desired to replace Imridalorcan. The older Elemental Lords didn't dare to underestimate Imridalorcan, but since they knew all the more how strong he was, it meant that they wanted all the more to seize this once in a thousand years opportunity. By the end, Camdion didn't even need to personally visit and persuade the elemental lords. Those elemental lords started creating factions of their own and kept massively adding to their numbers. The Earth elemental god had never done anything that would cause his citizens to respect and venerate him. After being missing for thousands of years, he was now about to meet the danger of his citizens' rebellion. Meanwhile, Ren was working hard in her own way, gathering a larger and larger demon army, which was already turning into a secret major catastrophe for this plane. If it weren't for the fact that the elemental lords wanted to deal with Immortal Lorcan first, perhaps their allied armies would immediately turn around and first fight with this demon leader who was messing around in the Earth elemental plane. As for the two semi-god mages in my little party, they didn't relax in their tasks either. In their dictionaries, there was no such thing as too much cannon fodder, as they only kept working at the tasks assigned to them. Those countless runic giants and earth element demonized plants were piling up like mountains, and when you add all that onto the other allied reinforcements we had recruited, Immortal Lorcan was likely going to be in for a world of pain. As for Immortal Lorcan, there was nothing but silence on his end. Although it could be felt that the mountains and cliffs were slightly trembling, as if there was some frightening existence breathing between them, apart from that there was no other movement from him. No elemental lords were summoned, and Immortal Lorcan himself hadn't shown up at all. It was as if he was still in a deep sleep. Ah, that Roland, he really knows how to treat us like servants, making us the scouts. Well, being able to see this is indisputably useful. It will make our chances of victory go up. Before she even finished speaking, Margaret had taken Adam and vanished. It was no wonder they were chosen as the scouts. Adam, the strongest tank, combined with Margaret's instant teleportation and offensive capabilities would allow this duo to successfully retreat even in front of Immortal Lorcan himself. It was to be expected that Immortal Lorcan wasn't on guard. For an elemental god, just having his physical body be destroyed would be enough for him to go into a long hibernation. Add on the fact that in order to vent his anger on us, he even used his divine soul to cast two spells that were at the level of a forbidden spell. The first one was to destroy Red Maple Castle's walls, and the other one was to give the beastmen from the plains a path to attack us. His spells indeed changed the entire combat situation. However, since he didn't even have a physical body when he cast those spells, it was no different from him self-destructing his divine soul, and he had paid a tremendous price. Without several hundred or even several thousand years of hibernation, he'd probably be unable to recover his power. In his eyes, that should have been enough to secure the situation. He probably never expected the beastmen to lose in the end, and when his weakened divine soul returned to the Earth elemental plane, he didn't dare appear in front of the other elemental lords. He went straight into hibernation back in his old nest. Without a doubt, this was a correct decision on his part. By simply hibernating for a while and borrowing the endless replenishment power of the Earth elemental plane, he would have enough strength to protect himself, which would obviously be much better than appearing in front of everyone in a weakened state and letting the ambitious Earth elemental lords discover his weakened state. He had only miscalculated the importance with which his opponents viewed him. They viewed him with such seriousness that they were all willing to stop what they were doing and spend every effort on eliminating potential problems down the road. In the end, due to his hibernation, Immortal Lorcan lost the chance to be proactive. The deadline of 2 months had only half a month remaining. This slowly gathering anti-Immortal Lorcan army already had approximately half the total combat strength of this entire plane. Without even needing to mention the countless amounts of cannon fodder, we didn't lack high-level combat strength either. As I would put it, with so many people, who needs combat strategy? All we need to do is attack. But I was saying that mostly to raise morale, as a majority of our army was still cannon fodder. After all, even if we had about half the entire plane's combat strength, Immortal Lorcan had the entire plane's strength available to him. As the master of this elemental plane, the elemental god would be able to use elemental power as he pleased within his own plane. To make an analogy, the entire Earth elemental plane was similar to a divine domain, and Immortal Lorcan would be stronger than any middle true god in here, much stronger than Felix who I faced a while ago. If it weren't for the fact that Immortal Lorcan was so seriously injured in the mortal plane, those veteran Earth elemental lords wouldn't even dare to think of a rebellion. They knew, however, that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for them. Yet as for truly how strong an elemental god was in his home turf, nobody would know unless we actually fought him. After all, the last time an elemental god was changed out was 5 or 6,000 years ago, so it was quite difficult to check recent history. Ask the water elemental goddess or wind elemental god? That would have been a nice idea but not a realistic one. To be honest, I had asked them before we split up, but they both remained abnormally silent. It was obvious that neither of them intended to reveal the full extent of their power in their home planes. Today's the Earth elemental god's turn, so they're worried about the next time being them? How? Cautious. We used to be enemies to begin with, and now we were only in a temporary alliance against a mutual enemy. I, too, didn't have the confidence if tomorrow they would turn on me, so it was more than reasonable for them to remain cautious. I also hid a large part of my abilities and powers, and it was only natural for them to hide information about themselves. I didn't even feel like I should say anything about it. To be honest, since all the elements have different properties, all of us have different fighting styles, and we can't provide any useful information to begin with. Besides, Immortal Lorcan's power and experience is far above ours, so there's even less to work with. In that case, rather than giving misleading information, it's better to not say anything at all. Honesty. This excuse sounded quite reasonable, but I'd be a fool if I really believed these words. But, it was still a nice excuse that would save face for both sides and allow us to still act friendly. And when the 2-month deadline was almost here, I finally received a piece of excellent news. Harlois woke up. Wonderful. Oh, did I forget to mention someone? I definitely didn't, but you insist that I did. Fine then, you're the one that's going to suffer. Let us see what that existence whose name had become a forbidden term has been busy with recently. In a distant desert, a half-dragon wearing a piece of tattered cloth was currently sitting down and smiling. Around him were stone giants, sandworm kings, sphinxes, and other various earth elemental creatures. All these elemental creature species were each other's natural enemies, but now, they were actually sitting together peacefully. The only one who could pull off such a miracle was, of course, the half-dragon who was currently spreading his way of life. Physical appearances are all fake. Everything is empty, and emptiness is everything. All lives are created equal, and appearances of the heart are the most important. All creatures in the world can have beautiful souls. Just because of some differences in physical appearance, you all hated each other and killed each other, which is the path of becoming a demon. Everyone is equal, and true love is limitless. Perhaps you all have different species and genders, but as long as you have a heart that seeks true love, all of you are foundationally brothers and sisters, with no differences whatsoever. The legend-ranked half-dragon was actually teaching his way of true love to the residents of the Earth elemental plane, and after hearing his way, or brainwashing, more and more elemental creatures began following him, believing in this way of mutual peace and love that didn't originate in this plane. I can feel how much effort you're all putting into this. I hereby solemnly swear that I shall walk to the ends of the heavens and earth to spread the way of true love, and I wish for all lives in this world to put down their biases, to ignore all species, gender, and physical appearances on their search for true love. I'm willing for 9 bolts of lightning to strike me in order to test my will. Confirm that my will is sincere. Boom. Right after the half-dragon said that he was willing to be struck by lightning to confirm his will, lightning really did strike him. Was it really to test him, or was it that the heavens couldn't stand the sight of him anymore and wanted to strike him dead? That was unknown. This sudden lightning caused all his new disciples to exclaim in astonishment. Lightning was extremely rare in the Earth elemental plane, and this energy-filled lightning element indicated that this was indisputably real lightning. The Earth elemental creatures had intended to rush forward and save him, but right then, Bai Feng's blackened skin molted, and new skin was revealed beneath it. After that bastard was struck by lightning, he was actually undamaged, and he even flashed his signature faint smile. Just as everyone has witnessed, my sincerity has moved the heavens. The heavens sent lightning down to test my will. Just as Bai Feng was acting all grand and roared at the sky, the dark clouds that continued gathering in the sky indicated that these 9 bolts of lightning were just the beginning, and his trial of lightning hadn't ended yet. His disciples were all panicking, and they tried to dodge the thunderstorm. Yet seeing how Bai Feng simply pointed at the sky and smiled, seeming like he didn't mind at all, they all calmed down. All the creatures around Bai Feng had devout expressions as they bowed towards him. But only Bai Feng himself knew that it wasn't that he didn't want to run, it was that he couldn't run. I sat down for too long and my legs are all pins and needles. After being struck by lightning, they're now completely numb, and even the smile on my face has frozen. Can I retract my words from earlier? Boom. Fine then. The heavens used its own method to reply to him. All the earth elemental creatures admired this mega-level thunderstorm that wouldn't be seen even once in 1,000 years. According to the stories, there were over 1,000 lightning flashes streaking through the sky that day, breaking the record for most lightning ever in the earth elemental plane. The part that made people feel the most speechless of all was that this scene actually became the divine miracle of this abnormal religion. An abnormal religion and philosophy had indeed begun taking root and growing. Chapter 216, Stories at the Library. As expected of the Mage Country, things are now even more ridiculous than before. It was a sea of books. The countless number of ancient bookshelves were filled with books, and each magical book was priceless and contained enough magical secrets to make anyone go crazy. After receiving a teaching certificate from the Mage Country, I acquired the right to enter this library. In this world, books were the most precious form of wealth, and reading was a luxurious form of enjoyment. Back then, it had been quite the difficult task to just obtain permission to use Tassel Kingdom's library. Mage Country was far more generous in this aspect. Even if it was thanks to Cade's recommendation that I was allowed to browse through these precious ancient tomes, it also, in a way, proved the foundation of what the Mage Country was built on: recording and transmitting magical knowledge, and seeking the truth and secrets of the world. Truth Overseer was the glorious, highest-ranking title in the Mage Country, and was already an explanation of its goal. The mage's goal had always been to obtain more knowledge and truth, and their highest ranks simply meant that those individuals had obtained more from the endless sea of knowledge. Of course, this was the ideal concept of a mage. In reality, there were plenty that were attracted to the mundane. After all, using the power and knowledge that they gained to exchange for the common world's authority and wealth was far too easy. There were even some mages that learned magic for the sake of obtaining authority from the very start. After cultivating to a certain extent, they would naturally leave. Yet the current me had no time to comment on the mages, as I was already spending most of my time perusing these magical books. However, there were far more books than I expected, and many books were covered in thick layers of dust. It would seem that nobody had read through them for a long time, and the books were obviously rather disorganized. It was exceedingly difficult to find the ones I was looking for. Perhaps I would be unable to succeed in what I wanted here. Also, the uninvited guest kept slowing down my progress as well. What a pity. Aston/Fimir/Aibed could have gone up one more rank. When old classmates had a reunion, it was only natural to discuss about what happened to the other classmates. However, there was only one type of sentence that always ended up being the conclusion, an exclamation on how a former classmate had ended up dying, and it made me feel rather pitiful and helpless. For high-level mages, increasing their lifespans wasn't a difficult problem. Turning into artificial life, half-elemental life, God on voice and so on were all possible. Even if one's luck was terrible and they turned into something like an undead lich, it was still yet another possible path. Of course, the prerequisite was that one's power level was high enough. Those who couldn't even reach the saint rank wouldn't have any access to such lifespan increasing options. What made me sigh and pity them was the fact that those mages, who should have reached such a rank to begin with, would always die off for seemingly random reasons. Just recently, an academic research journal did a study on the reasons for high-ranked mages' deaths, and it was astonishing. The undisputed leading cause was battle and war, which took up a whopping 71%. Natural deaths like dying of old age or disease was only number 2 at a mere 11%, and number 3 was dying accidentally during experiments. Most genius mages would get involved in some sort of conflict or battle or personal grudge over personal benefits and end up losing their lives. All those dreams and hopes of theirs would become nothing. Cade felt that it was both a regret for the geniuses that perished as well as a fortune, as he knew that among his classmates, His talent for magic was considered slightly below average. It was just that he was the type that disliked competing with others, and he preferred to always hole up in his home and conduct research, which imperceptibly led to him reaching the pinnacle. The geniuses that competed with each other all ended up with nothing but death, and the one who was below average and aware of it became a hermit and lived life peacefully. After a long time passed, it was the below average one who received everything. In a way, this was a subtle, wondrous irony. For most mages who abandoned the path of cultivating to become stronger, what stopped them wasn't their own weaknesses and personal strength but rather temptations and troubles from the outside world. By the way, are you really not making fun of me? I kept feeling like the meaning of these words were familiar to me. After all, I had died several times already, and I had to keep dealing with worldly affairs due to this and that. But Cade chuckled at my question. You think you count as a genius? Apart from getting full points in an elective class like Mage Personal Defense, what genius would have all his grades barely above the passing mark? You even failed a basic class like Elemental Concepts 3 times, and if it weren't for the fact that you got cozy with some female teachers, you probably would have been expelled long ago. When I heard this, I was instantly angered and couldn't respond. I knew it. Something that seemed cute, like childhood friends, weren't cute at all in real life, especially when the childhood friend was the same gender as you and knew about your dark history. They should all be sent to the moon tied to gnome rockets. I was pretty happy to have you in my classes, since that brought down the average grade of our classes significantly. I wouldn't have to worry about being the lowest scoring person in the class. Alright then, Roland the lowest scoring and Cade the second lowest scoring individual were chatting together about times long ago, sighing how time was cruel and all those geniuses had already perished. This seemed even more ironic now. Don't say that. You make it sound like I depended on women to support me. Hey, why are you looking at me like that with such surprise? Be careful, or I'm going to turn on you. You bastard. Don't you have any self-awareness? Roland, who's good for nothing except his face, the holy knight that entered the wrong job class, was quite famous back in the day. Don't you know that after you got with both Teacher Harlois and Teacher Amelia that so many people purchased drawings of you and used you as a voodoo doll? You seem to be quite well informed on this topic. My fists were clenched tightly in an obvious warning, but this guy didn't notice it at all. Of course, this was one of my main sources of income back in the day. There were many methods of going about it, and just drawing a picture that resembled you wasn't good enough. Not only did it need to look like you, but it also needed to piss people off, and I needed to draw vicious smiles on your handsome face in order to satisfy my customers. Especially after the news that you abandoned Amelia spread out, my business boomed. On that very day, I received enough orders to keep me busy for the next month, and I got enough tuition money for an entire year. That's why, even if you scam some gold coins off me now, it's not a problem at all. Seeing this old fellow who always acted so serious but wouldn't shut up about the topics he liked, I couldn't restrain myself anymore and viciously punched him. Clang. This time, it was actually my hand that was hurting. The light of something metallic was actually flashing on that bastard's face. Stone skin magic? No. Iron skin magic? Even though I didn't feel any waves of a spell being cast at all, Cade's skin was obviously as hard as iron. It was a magic I had never seen before. Hee. This is a magic I invented myself, although I got the idea from your legendary story about the Forest's Nun Convention and the 18 Wolverine old ladies that you told me in the past. I also named this spell Golden Bell Skin after the same technique in that story. It's able to transform my skin and bones into metal and make me as undefeatable as the undefeatable old lady and Wolverine old ladies in the story. Isn't it amazing? Fine then. It was a different world's magical version of the ancient Chinese martial arts technique Golden Bell Skin. I didn't even know where to start commenting from anymore. The Wolverine old ladies, the Nun Convention, or the undefeatable old lady? Nonetheless, this helped me understand that the current Cade was truly a powerful archmage, even if he still wasn't the serious type at all. Just like how ice magic was a branch of water magic, the closest type of magic to earth magic would doubtless be metallic magic, which was renowned for high defensive power. Unlike ice magic, which could be learned as its own unique branch, the metallic elements were tightly connected to the earth element, and without cultivating earth element magic to a certain degree there wouldn't be any way to learn metallic magic. Being able to permanently maintain a metallic magic spell like this was doubtlessly a unique high-level technique. Not only did this indirectly help me ascertain Cade's current power level, but it also gave me a new idea. Cade, come over and help me out. You should be very familiar with earth magic. Since Cairo City mainly had earth mages in it, its library was, of course, focused on information about earth magic, earth elemental creatures, and earth element magical materials. For me to be reading up on information here, it obviously wouldn't be because I wanted to learn earth magic. Although reading about other types of magic wouldn't have any downsides, it could even be adaptable, based on my talent for magic. Trying to learn an entirely new element's magic would take me at least several decades. I definitely didn't have the free time for that. Immortal Lorcan's the apex of earth elementals, and earth element magic is tightly connected to him. I don't believe he only has the power of this entire earth elemental plane. His past history, any weaknesses he has, any specialties of his, what elemental magic he excels at, and what ace cards he may have. Before we battle with him, we absolutely have to find out. Hearing this, Cade revealed a smile that seemed to say, I knew you would be like this. If someone else picks a fight with you, you would seem like you didn't care at all, but in actuality, you would work overnight on investigating the previous 18 generations of that person's family. You really are the same as back then. Cade continued to comment on my dark history and made me really want to beat him up. But he clapped his hands at this time. Clap, clap, clap. All the magical lights lit up in the library, and all the doors were opened with a large number of young acolyte magicians pouring in and working busily. Archmage Cade's message had already ordered them to begin the task of searching for information. They had begun with all the books on the bookshelves. Team A, start checking from the history section. See if there's any records of Immortal Lorcan personally fighting. We, the members of Team B, would like to investigate about similar earth elemental lords and the elemental gods. Their powers should be a good reference. Team C would like to start researching about the highest levels of earth element magic. There may be powers similar to Immortal Lorcan's there. The most important ones are the forbidden spells that humans are unable to use. Oh, and also the Elf Kingdom's forbidden spells. The acolytes began to actively research, and Cade was unusually serious as he spoke. At such a time, you can stop doing everything by yourself like in the past. Besides, this is also our battle, so just trust in your companions a little bit for once. This was the most serious that I had ever seen Cade. Alright. I was even somewhat moved, as I randomly took out a book and began reading. What's this? The cover said, How to Control and Construct with the Iron Element. But underneath the exquisite cover was actually a collection of pictures of naked young girls. The Archmage who didn't say anything but stole the book back from me was the best explanation. You use the books that nobody ever borrows as covers to hide your personal treasures. Even this part about you has never changed. When I looked around, there were quite a few acolytes furtively dashing directly towards specific bookshelves. It seemed that there were quite a few who actually did this. This is strange. I actually found a porn. Before that acolyte even finished his sentence, someone else beside him covered his mouth and dragged him away. Some things were known by everyone already, but their teacher was still here, and it wouldn't be good for it to be publicized. As for the treasure this acolyte discovered, it instantly disappeared, likely to become someone else's new personal treasure. Judging by the large scale of the acolyte sections, this was obviously a city where there were too many males and not enough females, and some job occupations were still quite undeveloped. Yet some occupations were obviously rather profitable, such as the gnome publisher's logo on all the picture books that indicated the source of all such books. All the acolytes' items had to be teleported over by the mage country's officials, and the luggage they could bring was limited. Since the gnome's dimension-tearing devices had fewer restrictions on them, even if only one book was successfully teleported over out of 10, as long as that book could be sold for the price of 10 books, it wouldn't be any loss at all. And from my understanding of the gnomes, they would most likely ask for a price that was sufficient for 1,000 such books. Hey, it really is just the same as long ago. What, you're still collecting this type of book? This time, It was my turn to tease this old gossip. The gnomes gave it to me for free, and I have no idea why they would do so, so I tossed it here. This old gossip's face was capable of turning red. This was a real sight to see. But if what he said was real, perhaps I would have to reevaluate the gnomes' capabilities. At the very least, their ability to bribe seemed ridiculous. At least, before you go, make the gnomes pay some money that they view as their own blood. They've been making too much profit recently, it's time they pay some of it back. Okay then, let us ignore that mysterious voice coming from the corner of the wall. You won't make fun of me, will you? Of course not, I can understand completely. How could you possibly understand? You winner in life. You were so popular back in the day, and you're still so young. These days, just how many girlfriends have you had? How many beautiful women have you had intimate contact with? Don't tell me, I don't want to know, you winner in life. My mouth twitched, but in the end, I didn't reply with what I wanted to. Actually, I'm the same as you. I've been single for the past 300 plus years. As for intimate contact with beautiful women, does having my body cut up and my heart dug out count? It is better to be a naive idiot than it is to be Imrudalorcan. When the innumerable amount of anti-Imrudalorcan forces finally arrived together without even the need to summon them, this casual sentence that I said was spread everywhere by everyone. In a way, I wasn't wrong at all. When all the anti-Imrudalorcan forces gathered together, even all of us were astonished at how powerful the final group was. There was some trouble, though, due to the chaotic command system structure and completely different weapons, equipment, and logistical needs. Not to mention that there were quite a few factions that had enmity with each other, and it was impossible to organize everything. Impossible to command everyone under a unified command system. It doesn't matter, just have everyone attack. You don't understand? Fine, let everyone fight under their own command and do as they like. Since this was just a temporary alliance to begin with, each faction's leader didn't think too highly of their other temporary allies. Forcefully requesting a unified system of command would probably end up with a bad result. Instead, if I allowed them to battle freely under their own commands and just take care of themselves, it would be much easier to receive a better combat result. And, at the current moment, I was busily needling a certain person's head with my fists. Ren, you really dared to do such a thing. Chapter 217, Rumors and Gossip. As the countless hordes of demon armies walked by, the earth would become scorched plains, and the air would be filled with the scent of sulfur. Rubble and dead bodies would become the mainstay of the world. If there was one racial prejudice throughout all the lands that could be viewed as natural and correct, the only one, perhaps, that could fit the bill would be the prejudice against demons. As the representatives of chaos, they indeed never did anything good. They would receive joy from killing other lives, with death and pitiful screams being the marching music for their armies. Souls were their food and replenishment, and even the existence of the undead, which brought death everywhere, was the creation of an ancient demon. Add on the fact that they always played the bad guy in every holy war, and even if it was a bit overboard to call them the root of all evil, it wouldn't seem strange to consider the demons as the final antagonists. In front of my eyes was such a large demon army. Their camp was filled with an aura of twistedness, and the earth itself seemed to be raging helplessly as the natural laws of the earth elemental plane were being rewritten. Take a look. This is my army, isn't it amazing? Looking at how proud this idiot girl was of herself, I was angry in so many ways. She was obviously just pretending to be a fool. The only part worthy of being happy about was that there was no twisted sensation from her that indicated she had been invaded by chaos. That meant that either she was able to perfectly conceal her own abnormal changes and twistedness, or she had completely taken control of chaos and hadn't had any changes to either her physical body or her soul. Considering her bloodline's connection, the latter seemed more likely, but even so, I was furious. You really dared such a thing. And you already know what the end result of dealing with demons is. I know more than a dozen whose bodies and souls have been devoured by demons, more than enough for a book titled Collection of Fools Deceived by Demons, and you still dare to. Ren didn't reply, and maintained her faint smile as she looked at me. Her look was one of "I've done it already, so what can you do?" At this moment, I knew that not only did she already know the consequences, but she intended to bear them. Forget it. I'm not going to care anymore, just do whatever you want. In the end, I could only angrily toss at this sentence, just like a parent who had been infuriated by a naughty kid. My sentence sounded quite serious, but it was actually a demonstration of my helplessness that couldn't be expressed in any other way. There's not much time left, and I don't want to only watch from the sidelines. Ren's reply gave me a sudden jolt in my heart. It seemed that I had only been giving my junior the best path I believed for her, but I had been ignoring her own feelings. The proper path was indeed wide and safe, but it was also difficult to walk down and progress would be slow. For her to be able to gain true top-level combat strength that could influence the entire situation while taking the proper path probably wouldn't be possible even by the end of this holy war. In the end, perhaps she was just like me from that year. Despite being the prince of a country with his citizens' trust, in front of the unchangeable situation and the unbeatable enemy, I could only watch as the knights and citizens were sacrificed and nothing could be done. Perhaps in Ren's eyes that was also the same fate that would befall her. In order to control her own fate, she made a choice to seek strength at any cost. Judging from her calm smile, she had already made up her mind to accept any potential consequences, including becoming my enemy. As a princess and the royal successor of East Mist, I can't give over my country's fate to anyone else. Even if its fate is to only be destroyed in the end, then, at the very least, I shall give everything I have in order to twist this damned fate. Beneath this seemingly silly smile was resolution matching that of her ancestors. Perhaps, from the very start, I had underestimated this little girl. Go self-reflect properly for me. Alright, I didn't know what else I should say to her. I tossed her this sentence, which seemed forceful on the surface but was actually meaningless, as I turned around and left, or perhaps I should use the word escaped. After I calmed down, I hesitated for a moment, before speaking in a low voice. Elisa, you understand a lot about demons. Yet the typical instant response didn't come. It seemed that even the silver ring had lost its power to contact Elisa due to the connection between the earth elemental plane and the other dimensions being cut off. Now, I didn't have a chance to gain more information on this topic. It seems I need to have a really good chat with Carwins, soon. Perhaps some things were simply unavoidable. Congratulations to host for improving your reputation in the mage country. You are now respected, infamy known to all. Please continue working hard. A sudden system message interrupted my thoughts. Although this doubtlessly indicated that I was making progress in my epic quest, when I took a look at my system menu, that, 67%, minus 33,423, incredible debt was impossible for me to bear looking at. I owe even more now. As for that, infamy known to all, in parentheses after my reputation level of respected, it's actually quite easy to understand. My system had rather normal sounding reputation levels of neutral, acquaintance, friendly, respected, venerated, and idolized. However, since I wanted to grind my reputation level quickly, I had taken a certain shortcut. Although this allowed my reputation level grew at a much faster pace, my earlier level of friendly had a villainous name known far and wide added behind it, and now my respected level had infamy known to all tacked on, which was something I felt rather helpless about. Shortcut? You see, this was what happened. Look, that's the Roland bastard who toyed with our angelic Amelia's feelings. Apparently, he was a mega-level scumbag back in the day. Don't point at him. Be careful of getting pregnant. It's said that he's a huge pervert who can cause a woman to get pregnant just by looking at her. He's already a grandpa that's several hundred years old, and he still likes to dress so young. His intentions are inscrutable. I heard that recently, he fooled another 10 young women. I heard that back in the day, he was dating 2 idol-level beautiful teachers simultaneously, and he even had an additional 2 girlfriends on the side. Later, he was discovered, and someone wanted to kill him, which was why he didn't even have time to get his graduation diploma and was forced to escape. As I was walking everywhere, I heard nothing but rumors. This made me want to go into a frenzy, but I absolutely couldn't. It was like hell. The reason? All the rumors and gossip were actually spread by me. In a way, it was also what I needed. This is no good. My reputation has been stuck at friendly, 212 20,000, for quite a while now. It seems I have no other method but to use this. Right before major battle, my ace card was currently under confiscation due to a lack of money. If I was the first person in history who lost a battle due to insufficient fate points, which were required to purchase back my debt, then that would be too humiliating. This strange reputation quest that my system had given me even required that I had to get to venerated in order to proceed with my quest. No matter how many good deeds I performed, I was still stuck at a little past friendly, still far away from respected. This was without even mentioning the venerated reputation rank, which I could only look at. This wasn't the first time that the system had given me a reputation quest. Before, the Roland Sacred Sword had a special effect, which helped its holder to greatly increase the reputation of the people of the mist. I had investigated the strange way that my system defined reputation before. It turned out that the system wasn't all powerful. This so-called reputation in the end was about how many people knew about you and how deep their impressions were of you. As for how many people specifically counted for 1 point, that was something I wasn't able to calculate. To make an analogy, the former reputation increasing effect of the Roland Sacred Sword, basically meant that all the people of the mist would have high expectations for the sword holder. They would voluntarily tell others about his identity and learn more about his deeds, and this so-called reputation would naturally keep increasing. As long as I know the rules, then I also know how to cheat. And so, after much deep contemplation, I thought of my previous world and how never-ending scandals about celebrities were always the news that people paid attention to the most. This allowed me to come up with my devious shortcut. Good deeds are never spread, while bad deeds will travel thousands of kilometers on their own. In the end, this reputation just requires me to be famous. For someone who's known to be excellent, at most maybe some parents would say you should try to be more like 30 and it wouldn't even spread to the next street over. But if it's some bad deed or scandal, it would probably travel 3,000 kilometers in a single night without me even needing to spread it. Any societies consisting of intelligent creatures are naturally highly interested in negative gossip, especially if it's a scandal regarding several famous people at once. Who cares about my face? I stopped caring about saving face 300 plus years ago. Alright, the truth was that all I had to do was toss out 2 slightly perverted stories, and then arrange an acolyte to ask me questions about these stories in a public place with many people around. I merely smiled and shook my head without forcefully denying it, which successfully created the gossip about my scandal. My original story was only about the past when I had an unsuccessful romantic relationship with Amelia, but based on what I'm hearing now, the rumors had completely gone out of control after they started spreading. Do you really believe that he can make a woman pregnant just by looking at her? Can you still really call yourself a mage? That's completely illogical by the laws of magic. No, just think about it. He's a senior student from Archmage Cade's generation, and he must be an incredible archmage as well. I heard that he successfully put a piece of his own soul into his own mana, and all he needs to do is stare at you to cast a mental magic that attacks your will. And that scary soul piece of his will directly use your physical body to create a new baby shard, which is what it means by he'll make you pregnant just by looking at you. In that case, wouldn't even men, I just met him yesterday and even smiled at him. He looked me in the eye. Could it be that Junior, I recommend that you go get a checkup in the infirmary. There's already a line several hundred long, and I have the paperwork indicating that I'm in the first 100 part of the line. I can sell it to you for cheap. To be honest, it was far out of my expectations for the rumors to spread to such a degree. The hell with getting pregnant just by looking at you. The hell with mental magic. The hell with a man getting pregnant. You guys actually believe such non-magical rumors and dare to call yourselves mages? Also, that one over there who's taking this chance to strike it rich, I'm going to remember you, brat. Don't let me find a chance. If I actually do get the chance, hey, just wait to see how I'm going to deal with you. The part that I was most aggrieved about was that I single-handedly created this situation. I couldn't even defend myself, as I needed these rumors to spread even wider. I even needed to inflame the rumors further, such as flirting in public with some beautiful ladies. Cough. This part wasn't because of my personal desires. Definitely not. I did, indeed, bring it upon myself, but how could I stand to suffer alone by myself? Look, that's the one who traffics underage girls, the white-robed perverted monster Cade. I heard he's committed countless crimes, and only his high status is keeping it all hushed up. How is that possible? Teacher Cade is well loved and respected by everyone. This must be a baseless rumor. No, no, see how he's a good friend of that pervert king? It's said that they often discuss how to commit crimes together, and when an acolyte directly asked that Roland about it, Roland didn't even deny it. And, so, Cade's clean reputation for the past hundreds of years was ruined. Well, he wasn't squeaky clean to begin with, and now that people had these rumors to go off of, old Cade's reputation instantly became rather strange as well. Oh, it's bad of me to do that to an old friend of mine. This was just a little return present. Did Cade really think that I wouldn't find out he was the one who added the making people pregnant by looking at them part to the rumor? He even twisted it by adding some crap about mental magic as well. Alright, let's not mention old Cade anymore while he's trying to salvage his reputation everywhere. But he's always met by female screams and shrieks and slaps. Although this self-ruining of my own reputation was a devious shortcut that definitely hurt my ego significantly, there were also apparent benefits. I got to respect it in just 2 days. It's scary how fast my reputation is growing now. I bet just about every faction in the Earth Elemental Plane knows about me. Although I was making good progress on my epic quest, which was obviously a good thing, I was all up in tears. Why? Because I went to a noodle restaurant last night for a bowl of noodles, and even a 70-year-old lady was so scared that she maniacally ran out of the store at the sight of me. I merely nodded at a young acolyte on the road, and that guy actually let out a death howl and then laid on the road and pretended to be dead. Can you believe it? That acolyte was even of the brawny muscular huge guy type. I was rendered speechless on the spot. Thanks to all these rumors, my reputation's becoming stranger and stranger. Who cares? What's reputation anyways? Can I eat it? Regardless, I've always been single even when I had a good reputation, and also single when I had a bad reputation, so isn't it all the same? Fine then, if it was really all the same, why were there still tears in my eyes? Although the negative rumors increased my reputation at an astonishing speed, there was still a bottleneck. Since there was a limited number of people in Cairo City, my reputation stopped increasing once my respected, infamy known to all, reached about half step 2 venerated, which was rather frustrating. It seems that I still need a huge scoop. Oh right, Amelia and the others are supposed to come here in 2 days to meet up. Perhaps. Let's go with that, then. I hope Polisa won't beat me to death when I return. As a veteran teacher of Cloud Tower, this wasn't the first time Amelia had been to Cairo. In fact, she even stayed here for 3 years and made countless hidden preparations. If it wasn't for that, she wouldn't have been able to create her plant garden so successfully. In order to scam and obtain more research funds, and also so that her private research wouldn't be exposed, she made quite a good effort at appearing proper on the surface. She always had a good reputation, and apart from a few ancients from the same generation that knew her for who she truly was, most mages treated her as a trustworthy elder. And thanks to her gentle appearance, fake, and ladylike behavior, fake, not to mention rumors that she had royal blood, true, and add on that she treated everyone the same, they were all experimental subjects to her. All of this further increased her popularity. In order to maintain her own good reputation, before she entered Cairo City, she hid all those unpleasant things of hers outside the city, and even especially changed her clothes, took a shower, and spent a lot of time in front of the mirror in order to conceal her maniacal aura. A perfect angelic Amelia appeared once again as she held a parasol and walked daintily into town. However, she immediately discovered that something was wrong about the situation. Everyone was looking at her strangely. In the past, there was respect, veneration, adulation, and, of course, love, but now, they were looking at her with sympathy, as if something pitiful had happened to her. Keep at it. Work hard. Everyone will still admire you like in the past. Let the past be the past. Us members of the Angel Support Club will forever support you. The cheers of encouragement she could vaguely hear from behind her were even more incomprehensible. However, she soon understood what it was all about. When she turned around a street corner, She arrived at Cairo's most flourishing and busiest intersection, a road that led directly to the city's center. However, the crowds of people typically here were nowhere to be seen, and luxurious fresh flowers were strewn about all over the street. There were even flags and balloons by the roadside, and in the middle of the flowers was a familiar, half-kneeling figure wearing white formal attire. "My beloved Amelia, please forgive my past transgression." "My darling Amelia, let us get back together again." Amelia was stunned for a moment before she squeezed a few words out between her teeth. "Roland, you bastard." Chapter 218, Stealing All the Headlines. I'd become famous. As I wished, I'm now headline news. I abandoned all so-called sense of shame for my reputation, and now even I feared myself after I gave up all my limits. I obtained those fresh flowers with great difficulty after I made an incredible effort to contact all the plant specialist mages I could. I stole my formal attire from some random groom, I spent a great amount of money to purchase those balloons from the gnomes, and if it weren't for the fact that it was still daylight, I even prepared gnome fireworks in case Amelia arrived at nighttime. You see, in order to steal all the headlines, I was giving it my all. It seemed that my luck was actually pretty good. At the very least, it was better than a certain person, who had failed to steal the headlines due to an even more attention-grabbing piece of news. One of the people involved was the famous beautiful archmage with a renowned reputation, Amelia, the former truth overseer, who possessed beauty, brains, and power. That was why this mega-level gossip of kneeling at the intersection to beg to get back together again immediately spread through the entirety of Cairo City in a single day. Just about everybody was discussing this hot topic. "Did you hear? That Roland guy actually bought all the available fresh flowers that day and spent at least several tens of thousands of gold coins, just for that one moment." Seeing my reputation points increase at a furious pace, I was both delighted and frightened. I prayed that this incident wouldn't become known in the mortal plane, especially by a certain person. And what scared me the most of all was Amelia's reaction. If she beat me up at that time, I had expected an over 90% possibility that she would react like that, which would actually be easy to deal with. As long as she beat me up, this incident would end just like that, and the headline would be set. The failed romance would easily become a huge piece of news, and this would actually solidify my status as a scumbag even more. By the way, it wasn't easy for me to think of some way to give myself the reputation of a scumbag. However, Amelia's reaction was far from what I expected. She neither got angry, nor did she go on a rampage right then and there. She only ground her teeth and squeezed out the words "Roland, you bastard" in a particularly low voice. When combined with her mysteriously reddening face, it would easily make others read too much into it. I could understand, as I knew she was just forcing down her anger in order to protect her angelic reputation and not get exposed here. But what was with her red face as she accepted my flower bouquet? Was this supposed to be accepting my request to get back together again? But the problem was that this was all just a rumor to begin with no romance to begin with. How could we possibly get back together? Congratulations, you actually got ahead of me in finding a girlfriend. And she's even teacher Amelia. Having a student-teacher romance? You lucky bastard. Sigh, I suppose that in this entire world, only you can conquer her heart. Treat her well in the future. Stop messing around, or there'll be quite a lot of people that'll come looking for trouble against you. Cade. This guy's congratulations for my upcoming wedding was coming way too soon. Stop touching your beard and pretending to be giving me your blessings while acting like some saint. I still wasn't prepared yet. Alright, since I didn't think before I acted, perhaps I was now in deep trouble. Now, whenever I saw Amelia, who was always so direct and unabashed in the past, she would blush to the point where even her ears would turn red, acting all shy. When the ferocious tiger suddenly turned into a cute tiger, when the maniacal witch suddenly turned into a romantic teenage girl, this abnormal feeling made me really want to smash my head against a wall. Smack. 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 Fine then, I already did smash my head into the wall to the point that I was bleeding all over. But this still hadn't been resolved. The past few days even Ren had been looking at me with an expression that she believed I was a scumbag. The most abnormal part of all was that after I finally got to venerated status, there wasn't something like, villainous name known far and wide, tacked on to the end like usual, but instead, venerated, playboy who has finally reformed, 20,000 points. System reminder, as a playboy who's finally reformed, you need to treat Amelia well from now on. As your mother, I'm so proud of you, and I wish you the best. You absolutely have to have an active little baby that's just as mega level mischievous as the two of you. Alright, at the time I truly didn't know how to respond anymore. If it was possible, I really wanted to fight my system to the death, but the other slightly more serious system notification finally allowed me to heave a sigh of relief. System notification: the mage country Arlodent now views you as venerated. The first stage of the epic ranked quest Battle of Two Dragons has been completed. You have now officially chosen the mage country, and will be rewarded with 50,000 fate points. For the next step, please proceed to the mage country's capital of Arlo to find the truth overseer named Oslawan. If you don't trigger the next stage of the quest within 1 year, 100,000 fate points will be deducted. 88%, 10,243. Perhaps this large number of fate points that I just received gave my system new motivation. Its comments were sharper than ever before. As for the next stage of my quest, I didn't intend to do it for the time being, as the reward seemed so easy to come by. Easy? Are you really sure? And the part where I would suffer would likely come later. And as for that point deduction punishment, all I had to do was secretly run off and trigger the next stage of the quest at some point in time. Do you think your system is an idiot? Alright, I knew that I would likely suffer at the hands of my system in the end, but there was nothing wrong in dreaming a good dream, was there? I truly felt that my system was preparing a deep pitfall for me, and I really didn't want to jump into it. But based on my understanding of the system, there would always be a reason for me to jump into it in the end, and I would be forced into it. After I tossed all those annoying things to the back of my mind, there were still things that I could be happy about. At the very least, my reputation increased at a much faster rate than I had expected, and I didn't even need to use my backup plan, which would risk Adam beating me to death, dragging the other beautiful and well-renowned mage Margaret's name through the mud in order to have a forbidden taboo love triangle scandal, or even a love square. I suddenly couldn't help but feel a strong sense of pity for myself. In such a day and age, apart from me, was there anyone else that would voluntarily make himself into a scumbag? Why was it so difficult to obtain some reputation? Fine then, let's not talk about those heartbreaking things anymore. Let's focus on the happy things in life, instead. At the very least, our allied armies had finished organizing. Although it was impossible to have an overall command system or anything like that, all the factions were very interested in eliminating Imridalorcan. At least before we accomplished our goal, I wouldn't have to worry about any internal conflicts causing our self-destruction. In order to prevent a hilarious scenario like Roland felt that he had such an advantage that Roland decided to just haul-out attack without a plan. Oh, Roland is now typing GG, good game and surrender, how regrettable appearing. I indeed made some efforts at increasing our chances of victory. The first wave sent out would forever be cannon fodder, but this time, the cannon fodder was at quite a high level. The huge demon army became our first wave, and of course, if everything was successful, they might even become our last. As for why I sent the demons as the first wave, it wasn't that I personally viewed them with distaste, it was that all the other species and factions viewed them with distaste. Just standing together on the same side as demons made them all feel unpleasant, and they kept worrying about the possibility of some horrific plot awaiting them at the end. You say that there's a top-level demon warlock in your army controlling these demons? Stop joking around. You think I'm a novice greenhorn? There's no way that anyone from the mortal plane could possibly control such a large-scale demon army. How is it possible for there not to be some demon lord from the lower planes here? Don't work hard only to have the demons reap all the benefits in the end. Before we understand what's really going on, we refuse to listen to your commands. Well, it couldn't be helped that the demons had such a negative reputation. For our own side's morale and trust, I had Ren send out her entire demon army for them to be the first wave of cannon fodder. Ren unhesitatingly and directly accepted. She stood on her demonized dragon's back and watched her destructive demon army proceed, leaving nothing but scorched earth in their wake. I mysteriously felt as if it would be really fun, giving me the feeling of an evil boss behind the scenes. You finally feel the joy of it? You were a lich and then the commander of tremendous undead armies. You always used so many underhanded plots, with even the gods falling victim to you. You were always the biggest evil antagonist of all. Fine then, I now regretted asking Ren. Suddenly, she smiled as slyly as a fox. However, there's nothing wrong with playing the role of the antagonist. At the very least, bad people live far longer than good people. If you really were as proper and had good morals like the main characters of most stories, you'd perhaps be nothing more than a rotting corpse by now. Ren even nudged over to my side and rubbed me with her shoulder like she was a kitten, and used a respectful tone that was incredibly rare for her. It seemed to be her own way of acting spoiled and apologizing to me. HMPH, don't even dream of me forgiving you so easily about using the powers of chaos. Although I said so, even I myself was unable to say anything too vicious to her. Perhaps the moment I had discovered how similar Ren was to Prince Roland from my past was when I silently admitted her independence and her right to make decisions for herself. When we returned to the mortal plane, arrange a time for me to have a discussion with Carwins. Hearing this, Ren instantly cheered up and was filled with a bright smile. Okay. HMPH. You start shining as soon as I give you a little sunlight. Remember, power is only a tool, don't be controlled by the power. Second brother Carwins also tells me this as well. Alright, just when did Carwins become her second brother? It seemed that I still underestimated this girl's basic instincts. Some things I still had to remind her about, however. Never trust the chaos. Chaos is unpredictable. If it could be predicted, it wouldn't be chaos. You must learn how to master chaos, and not be mastered by chaos. Second brother says this as well. Fine, since I couldn't gain any verbal advantages here, I might as well just focus instead on the army that's just attacking all out without any plan. Against several dozen armies worth of demons, not a single individual would be able to retain their calm. From the very start of battle, things instantly fell into a cruel war of attrition. Immortal Lorcan left methods behind to protect himself as I expected. As soon as the demons entered his territory, countless numbers of earth elementals came out from deep within the ground, and tremendous earthquakes created countless crevices. As the demons kept falling into the rifts, the shape of the land was transformed enormously. As for the demons that didn't fall to their deaths, they were now trapped in the newly divided land, facing against earth elemental creatures that were many times their number. However, there were just too many demons. The winged demons began organizing aerial assaults, and the earth elemental creatures mostly lacked the ability to fly. This made the combat situation quickly tilt in the demons' favor. This seemed so easy. Rumors of that immortal Lorcan's strength must have been greatly exaggerated. I only smiled upon hearing this. If immortal Lorcan was truly so easy to deal with, I would have come looking for him the moment I arrived in the earth elemental plane. Why else would I spend so much effort in preparing against him beforehand? Even a sinking warship would still have a couple of cannons. As the most ancient elemental god of all, even if he was greatly weakened, he would surely have many trump cards up his sleeve. The demons alone would be able to take care of him? I wasn't that optimistic at all. I only hoped that it would force out a couple of his aces, and the best result would be that immortal Lorcan personally came out. But judging from the current development, I wouldn't be able to see him with just the power of the demons. Suddenly, the entire area began trembling violently before the ground fissured yet again. This time, several dozen tremendous giant sandworms came out of the ground. Giant sandworms were low intelligence earth elemental creatures that were several hundred meters long. All they knew was to eat and sleep, but no resident of this plane ever dared to look down on them. That was because they were big, very big, ridiculously big. Just their heads were about as large as gnome bulldozers, but their snake-like bodies were well over 100 meters in length. Fully mature adult giant sandworms could grow to 300 meters, and their bodies were as solid as iron. Normal weapons couldn't pierce them, nor did they have the sense of pain. Even if one was unable to devour you in a single gulp, they would definitely be able to drag you into the earth and strangle you to death. If these creatures happened to appear, any unlucky place that met them would be forced to move its settlement, even those completed for a long time. These ferociously strong low intelligence creatures were always treated as a natural calamity of this plane. But now, it seemed that as the oldest resident of this plane, Immortal Lorcan had a way to control them. Ren's demon army consisted entirely of earth elemental creatures that had recently been demonized. Even though they were incredibly numerous, the demon army lacked high-level demon commanders. These demons still had the same earth magic and abilities as their original forms, which were basically zero threat to the giant sandworms. The giant sandworms' gigantic bodies literally ignored all the demons' physical attacks, and now, the newly born demon army had met their most difficult opponent. How about having the demons retreat? No need, we can't take them back to the mortal plane anyways, so we might as well have them expend their passion. Ren's eyes were glowing with the dusky yellow of chaos, its power under her control. My slaves, show me your utmost loyalty to your master. She cupped the flames of chaos within her hand, which transformed into droplets in the sky. It then turned into a demonic flash, illuminating the sky with blood red. The demon army paused for a moment, then suddenly sped up as they blindly rushed towards those giant sandworms. And then, boom! Self-destruction was the most common ability to all residents of the lower planes. That attack contained all their life force and power, and would at the very least be 3 times stronger than any of their other attacks. Moreover, these demons knew how to group together before self-destructing, which only added to the explosion's power. Even the strong giant sandworms were unable to deal with this endless number of self-destructions. They rolled and thrashed around in soundless pain, and their green blood spilled everywhere. As if they had discovered the prey before them wasn't delicious at all, the injured giant sandworms kept retreating into the ground and disappearing. It seemed that Immortal Lorcan's control over them wasn't all that strong. Currently, there was still a significant amount of the demon army remaining. They grouped up and rushed towards the earth elemental god's domain, when a sudden dragon breath sandstorm appeared behind us. The inferno demon dragon that we rode on hurriedly turned around and dodged the dragon breath sandstorm, but its movements almost caused me and Ren to fall off in the process. You dare to twist the proud will of my tribe. Invaders from another plane, meet your destined doom. That was the angry roar of a huge sand dragon. The skies were now filled with yellow-gray dragon wings. As Immortal Lorcan's allies, the sand dragons had arrived. As for me, I had expected this as well, which was why I laughed. Amelia, the sand dragons were on Immortal Lorcan's side as expected. It's your turn. What? You won't do anything unless I promise to go on a date with you? My dear lady, please don't try to take advantage of the situation. Fine, fine. I'll agree to it all. Chapter 219, Small Forbidden Spell. The law god was fair, but in a way, he was also strict. As the embodiment of fairness, he always followed his divine obligation of law and abandoned all sense of self in exchange for pureness. This actually allowed Woomian's growth rate to surpass all other gods. Even the back door I left behind would only be able to temporarily influence Woomian's, but some troublesome matters were unavoidable. For example, as a member of the Order Gods, Woomians would instinctually reject the members of Chaos, which was why Ren, who had now accepted Chaos, was destined to lose her job class as a Law Knight. Ren, level 60 Law Knight, former, level 20 Aurora Knight, level 14 Black Hell Knight, total level, 94, general level, 97, general assessment, average legend rank. I didn't know what exactly Ren had done, nor did I want to know whether it was because she used the power of demons or did something overboard that caused her to lose her Law Knight class. Demons typically obtained power through destruction and sacrifice, and judging from Ren's ridiculously high speed of growth in ranks, she probably didn't do anything good. Even if most elemental creatures were wild beasts with no will of their own other than instinct, and even if they could regather their elements after destruction, it was still no excuse to slaughter them en masse. This was the most likely the reason she lost her Law Knight job class. I was still able to keep my law job class probably because I was so skilled at finding the loopholes in laws. In my eyes, this invasion of another plane was nothing than a rather large-scale hunt for an escaped criminal. Yep, an escaped criminal. Immortal Lorcan, crimes of murder, war, species genocide, destruction of public property and so on. He was nothing more than an unreformable criminal. His first action changed the shape of the earth. He was an accomplice to the Beastmen as one of the perpetrators of war. His second action, taken in rage, even destroyed the defense lines at Red Maple Castle. causing countless deaths among the human warriors. The bloody battle during the snowy night afterwards could probably be attributed to him as well. And, as for the beastmen from the plains that ambushed us in the end, if it weren't for the grey elves and distant armies from Zuyuo that stopped them in their tracks, they probably would have caused the entire combat situation to turn in their favor again. In fact, the entire Northlands might have been lost and the beastmen would have become the new rulers with another round of species genocide. After all, in such a situation, even I wouldn't be able to overturn it anymore. A trump card like God's Descent wasn't something I could use against mortals. I definitely wasn't some hot-blooded defender of justice, nor did I even agree that this cruel world still had a concept such as justice. It was just that I still remembered all those innocent citizens and warriors' unsatisfied looks in death as they died protecting their homes. If I couldn't make Immortal Lorcan pay the price, I probably wouldn't be able to sleep peacefully at night anymore. Everyone, pay attention. Focus your attacks on the elemental throne. I refuse to believe that that bastard will still be able to hide like a coward. Fight for the sake of justice for the deaths of innocents? I wasn't such a good person. I simply didn't like him. That bastard felt like he would be fine after hiding in his own home after causing such a ruckus. He thought he would be able to sleep in peace, believing that nobody would dare do anything about him. Yet I had no intentions of letting him sleep as he pleased. I preferred to instead have this bastard die as well to accompany those innocent citizens. Right now, the battle was at a stalemate. As expected of the most ancient elemental god, he was now summoning all sorts of ancient contracted allies, and countless amounts of cannon fodder were forced onto the battlefield by him. Sand dragons, single pincer beasts, Kasla elemental knights, giant sandworms, descendants of titans, earth dwarves, mountain giants, Abaros monsters, and various ancient species that had already disappeared from history all came to this battlefield. This was basically turning into an earth elemental creature museum. But we weren't letting them have it easy either, as we weren't exactly pushovers. Amelia's Death Garden, Margaret's Rune Puppets and Rune Giants, and all the various Earth Elemental Lords' armies went to the battlefield in turns. It was just a cannon fodder contest, so what did we have to fear? Both sides' elemental creatures fought just like this, and huge dragons roared in the skies as the tower giants and their inhabitants entered the battle. Everything was now in chaos, and Immortal Lorcan's elemental army seemed to be imperceptibly yet constantly increasing in number. However, this was all within my expectations from the very start. As this was Immortal Lorcan's main home, if he was all by himself, I would have begun suspecting whether or not there was some scheme. This endless summoning of reinforcements meant that he was obviously in a tight spot already, and as for his next step, if he still hasn't appeared yet, it's obvious that he's stalling for time. Immortal Lorcan's no coward who fears death. In that case, it means he has an ace that needs more time. After coming to this realization, I didn't intend to wait around any longer. Cade, it's up to you guys. Don't we need to disperse our own forces first? Even if we're just acting, we should do it as believably as possible. There's no need. As long as Immortal Lorcan isn't an idiot, he can't possibly allow us to finish casting. If he truly doesn't even have the power to stop a forbidden spell's casting anymore, then we just have to stop it ourselves mid-cast. Ha! You make it sound so easy, since you're not the one casting the forbidden spell. Although Cade was complaining, judging from the elemental tide's fluctuation that suddenly magnified by several times, the forbidden spell had already started to be prepared. Amongst all the major countries, the mage country had always had a relatively good reputation. But if there was anything they were unreasonable about, it was the fact that they were too obsessed about all types of magic. As large-scale weapons, forbidden spells were treated as the ultimate weapons of magic. In the mage country's capital's library of forbidden books, it was said that they had collected more than half of all known forbidden spells in the world. This was doubtlessly a fearsome threat all by itself. Actually, having the information and theories on forbidden spells didn't mean that they were usable. First of all, there would be extremely high requirements for the caster's level. The number of mages that could cast each forbidden spell would definitely be in the single digits. And the most important of all was that forbidden spells weren't easy to use. A mage's mana was limited. In order to cast a spell of such power, the spell would naturally be connected to the natural laws of the world and the sources of the elements, which would always be a complex, difficult, and dangerous process. Basically, the moment a mage started casting a forbidden spell, he was turned useless. The casting times for forbidden spells were typically long to begin with, and even the shortest would always take several hours. In this period of time, he wouldn't be able to move, nor would he be able to stop casting. He would have to continuously mutter incantations to control the magic, and if he was attacked during the process, he would either have to forcefully stop the magic and receive a life-threatening backlash, or grit his teeth and take the attack. No matter what he did, he would likely end up dead. Once a forbidden spell was begun, the unimaginable waves sent out by the elemental tide was basically no different from a loudspeaker broadcasting to the entire battlefield. "Hey, I'm about to start a huge area of effect magic. If you don't want to die, come kill me." Anyone who wasn't an idiot would spend all efforts on stopping this forbidden spell. And the most pitiful part of all was that forbidden spells would use up the caster's lifespan. Something like 10 years worth of lifespan was quite common. Some top-level forbidden spells even required the caster's very life and soul as a sacrifice, and in the end, any forbidden spell mages typically wouldn't live very long whether they used forbidden spells or not. There were far more mages that could secretly use forbidden spells than the publicly known ones. Of course, these limitations were only for mortals. For example, in Allen's Reign capital, divine-powered forbidden spells had both much more power and stronger effects than mortals' forbidden spells, but even so, the storm goddess and water elemental goddess paid a tremendous price. Forbidden spells that borrowed from divine power had a weakness that wasn't publicly known. They mostly lacked power to directly kill people. Even if they were able to kill people, it would typically be in an indirect fashion. I didn't believe at all that this was because the true gods would take pity on the mortals. This was most likely another way of how the gods were forbidden to directly interfere with the cycle of reincarnation. The previous generations where forbidden spells could be casually tossed out on battlefields with ancient gods and magic everywhere was long past already. In modern battles, even with forbidden spell mages, that was only a type of threat that wouldn't be used unless it absolutely came to it. After all, forbidden spell mages would want to have longer lives as well. But there were always exceptions to everything. In the modern era, there was a certain mage who didn't follow any of the rules at all, tossing out forbidden spells like common vegetables and causing a series of incidents. Fine, that was me, Lord Young I from before. As for why I dared to run rampant like that, it was mainly because I had endless undead armies acting as my shield. Even if some strong ones managed to break through all the way to face me, my loyal red hunting hounds would teach them the price of using their ultimate abilities too early just to get to me. And as for any magical backlash and cost to my lifespan, since I had a Lich's body, I stopped caring about those things long ago. If any serious after effects ever happened, I still had my system to clean things up for me. The current me no longer had the power to cast forbidden spells, but Kay did. With Amelia and Margaret's assistance as two top-level mages from the Truth Symposium, the Earth Element Specialist Cade would be able to borrow the endless elemental power of the Earth Elemental Plane to use the forbidden spell Continental Sinking, Incomplete Edition. Yep, it was indeed incomplete. Cade's power level was insufficient to cast the true version of Continental Sinking, which ranked near the top even amongst all forbidden spells. Continental Sinking's complete version would be able to cut off an entire continent and sink it into the sea or even bury it into the ground. It was something incredibly fearsome. As for Cade's version of the Continental Sinking forbidden spell, Incomplete Edition, it's probably just an earthquake at the level where it could make people hide under tables, but wouldn't be able to harm a single person. The fact that the attack power of Cade's spell was so insignificant aside, this was actually a complete forbidden spell of its own, and as long as Cade's power level was sufficient and he didn't fail in the casting, it would definitely seem exactly like a real top-level forbidden spell. At the moment, countless numbers of rocks started floating in midair, and floating islands suddenly increased in number by several thousand. The never-ending sandstorms in this plane fell abnormally silent, and only the scary seeming increase in the elemental tide was evidence of the calm before the storm. Target: Elemental Throne. Elemental thrones were basically the equivalent of the elemental god's home in this plane, as well as the connection between an elemental god and the elemental plane. It was definitely their greatest weakness. Of course, In normal situations, the elemental god would die first, and the elemental throne would simply have a new owner afterwards. But if this top-level forbidden spell destroyed everything around here and cut off the elemental throne's connection to the earth elemental plane, perhaps the next new earth elemental god's birth would have to wait first for the birth of a new elemental throne, which would take thousands of years rather than hundreds. We knew that this was nothing more than a fake forbidden spell, so that couldn't possibly happen. But Immortal Lorcan would believe that we were going all out. As long as he was still alive, it would be impossible for him to watch and let us cast this forbidden spell. This was the strategy of attacking the enemy at his greatest weak spot, which he would be forced to defend. It was a vicious strategy that would give us the advantage of proactiveness. Or, to put it simply, it was just bait. And things developed as I expected. Not even 2 minutes after the forbidden spell started casting, a white shadow appeared on the battlefield, rushing at high speed towards Gade. Immortal Lorcan has finally appeared. He's taken the bait hook, line and sinker, and now it's time to reel in the net. Chapter 220, Busy People. A 6-hour-long marathon-like discussion was just about to finish in Definder's royal palace. Then, the next meeting will most likely be in 6 months' time. Please prepare the mine production samples and tax-free item lists by that time. In the next meeting, we shall try to finish all business-related agreements that apply to the entire Mist Alliance. In order to show the importance of the next meeting, Queen Gleena will personally come to sign off on the contract at that time. We hope that your side will be able to give us equal treatment. Of course, the publicity work will also be left to your side since you're all the same species with the same culture and language, and this is an excellent chance to greatly improve the relationship between our kingdoms. This chance for publicity shouldn't be wasted. Equal treatment? I understand. I shall inform Princess Ren. But by 6 months' time, she might very well be Queen Ren. Ha ha. That's even better. It's getting late, so I shall take my leave first. Elisa, who seemed so energetic, just earlier sighed with a face filled with worry. She watched the horse-drawn carriage fade into the distance with the young diplomat Wind from Sloweaver Kingdom who she just sent off. It's been so long since I've been able to make contact. I hope that nothing bad has happened to him. No, since the entire Earth elemental plane has been cut off, then there must be some big incident going on over there. I can only hope that he returns safely. Relax. I watched those two mischievous bratty twins grow up. Neither of them seemed like they would be the short-lived type. Kelly smiled and there was pride in her tone, but was it really alright for her to be calling Roland a brat? Perhaps you shouldn't be worrying about Roland, instead, worry about that Immorty something. Don't judge Roland by how calm he seemed on the surface when he left. Actually, the angrier he is, the calmer he'll appear to be. He's definitely bearing a grudge right now. Based on my understanding of him, if he's in a bad mood, he'll plot on how he can make someone else even worse off than he is. So, you should be worried right now about his enemy, not Roland. In a way, this wood elf was the one who watched Prince Roland grow up, and she made this deduction using her instincts, which was actually quite close to the mark. They have their battlefield, and we have ours. We can't have them looking down on us when they return, so let's work hard, young Elisa. They were actually busy with official work as the background scenery for their chat. Just leaving for a little while caused the documents and letters that needed their attention to pile up like mountains. Of course, I still need much assistance from Sister Kelly, and there's still so many things I would like to learn from you. Elisa smiled and nodded. Kelly, who had assisted over 10 generations of Mist royalty, was basically unbeatable when it came to any political matters. Kelly's hundreds of years of political experience was astonishing, and Elisa had learned a lot. When Roland became the absentee leader and even Ren followed after him, all the political and military affairs of the Eastern Mist communal country were left to Elisa and the others who had stayed behind. Military affairs were quite easy. With the Red Hunting Hounds and their knights staying behind, the creation and training of various military squads went quite well. There was also no need to change the overall military organization significantly. But, on the other hand, the political matters regarding the citizens were rather critical. These issues were ones that couldn't wait for even a single day. Although East Mist didn't have the serious problems of Sloweaver Kingdom like reconstruction after battle, Just the large numbers of Grey Elves moving to East Mist and how to accommodate them had all the local officials busy thinking up plans. Increasing the number of living facilities and new cities as well as redesigning old cities all became number one in priority. Apart from all this, there was also the scheduled expansion of Divinder's city limits for the upcoming spring, the planting of new crops, and various annual tasks at hand. The first task would affect nearly 30% of the citizens' living area, and the second had to do with the upcoming year's food production. Both were critical tasks that they couldn't afford to have any problems appearing with. And, recently, something even more important was adding to everyone's burden, making the East Mist officials overloaded when they were already at their limits. In just one short week, the number of governmental officials that had been sent to the hospital for overwork had reached double digits. This headache of an issue that everyone had to deal with using all their energy was the setup of the Mist Alliance. This was doubtlessly a good thing. Just the news of such an issue would cause the entire country to celebrate. After all, after the Mist Alliance's flag was finally flown, it would mean that the people of the Mist had finally gathered together again. In a way, this would mean the reconstruction of the already destroyed Mist Kingdom. But some things were just too sudden. According to traditions, even trade discussions would typically take several months to complete, and it would usually take a military alliance 1 or 2 years to finish the negotiations. For something as huge as a mutual alliance, economics, military affairs, politics, agriculture, diplomacy and so on all needed to become unified and reach an outcome that every single country could accept. This definitely wasn't a task that could be completed with ease. 10 or 20 years? Perhaps 10 years would be realistic, but the time limit that Roland had given them was a mere 2 years. As the core countries of the Mist Alliance, the Eastern Mist Communal Country and Slower Kingdom were required to finish all the foundational work for unification within a single year. The heavy workload required for this was likely sufficient to send several hundred more governmental officials to mental hospitals in the near future. To be honest, in just this short time, several more patients were registered due to overwork. As the highest level female official as well as private tutor in the royal palace, even if she didn't have an official governmental position, Kelly was indeed the core of the newly born Eastern Mist Communal Country. But even the Wood Elf with extremely high stamina was also quite fatigued by the recent heavy workload. Clap. 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 Kelly lightly clapped her hands to attract the attention of all the busy officials. As she looked at everyone's tired faces, she came to a decision. It's almost dinner time, everyone should dress up early tonight. No working overtime, we'll just continue tomorrow. But we haven't finished our work yet, and the Shah and tribes are coming tomorrow. We still haven't prepared the new contracts, and the report from the intelligence department hasn't even arrived yet. Only by pacing yourselves will you be able to go farther. I don't wish to see everyone here in the hospital. No matter what work remains, do it tomorrow. This is an order. Could it be that when Ren and Roland aren't here, none of you will listen to me? In everyone's eyes, Kelly, who seemed to be smiling ever so cutely, was actually rather scary. But, her seemingly forceful order was also filled with concern that warmed their hearts. Hey, even if Ren and Roland were here, they probably wouldn't be of any help, and would only add to the mess. Elise's words, however, caused everyone to start laughing uncontrollably, but this was indeed the truth. If Ren had been present, she would be nothing more than a rubber stamper, and someone would even need to be sent out to find her as she would always skip out on work. It was pretty much the same if Roland was present, with the only difference being that there was no need to send anyone to look for him. That was because as long as Roland himself didn't show up, nobody else would ever be able to find him. Why are they both so similarly skilled at giving other people trouble? HMPH. When he comes back, he really needs to pay us well for doing all this. While complaining, the two of them began working on various tasks. Neither of them was an ordinary person, and both of them had excellent bodies, so it seemed that they wouldn't be able to escape from overtime. As for me, I was far off in another plane, and I couldn't possibly know about the things happening in my homeland. Nor did I have any time to think about them, as the powerful Earth Elemental God was the only thing on my mind, giving me enormous pressure. Even though a major battle was clearly about to occur soon, I spent much of my precious time before the battle in the library. Of course, There was a good reason for that. Information was key to winning 100% of battles. If I couldn't even find out what aces Imrudalorcan had up his proverbial sleeve, of course I wouldn't be able to prepare for combat against him. If I had to use human lives to block him in the end, that would make me lose the advantage of proactiveness. As the most ancient of the elemental gods, even if there were records of him personally fighting before, they would likely be from several thousand years ago. Although the two elemental gods on my side provided a little information, not even mentioning the fact that it was likely outdated, the fact of the matter was that Imrudalorcan had never been truly forced to the brink before. It was only national that the other two elemental gods didn't know if he still hit any aces. However, with the assistance of several top-level archmages and hundreds of acolytes, we checked a countless number of books and discussed all our combat experiences. Anything related to earth magic was counted, and we summarized hundreds of rules and common methods by which earth elementals used earth magic along with their highest level magic. Our final anti-Imrudalorcan plan contained a full 30 volumes and filled up an entire bookshelf. Not only did it involve plans against Imrudalorcan, it was also a foundational summary of earth magic, which would be incredibly useful in earth magic cultivation and research in the future. At the time, Cade was incredibly overjoyed and said that the result of this time's research meant that he wouldn't have to worry about research funds for at least the next 10 years, which made Amelia rather jealous. There was an old phrase in the Magic Society: how much power a mage has depends on how long he has prepared for. If the mage has prepared for long enough and has a sufficient amount of backup plans and resources, it is possible to even slay a god. If someone simply goes up to his enemy with caring about anything at all, wouldn't he be no different from a musclehead? If it weren't for the fact that Margaret kept glancing in my direction out of the corner of her eyes as she said this, I would have readily agreed. After confirming my enemy, I would observe my target and collect information before formulating a plan. Apart from an incredibly few, most of those of a job class such as a mage were extremely inept at melee combat. Never facing someone from the front was the most national thing of all. In many previous situations, we had been forced to battle, so there wasn't enough prior preparation. This time, however, we had plenty of time, and all our combat extrapolations and preparations were more than plenty. Otherwise, we wouldn't have come to attack Imrudalorcan in his own home. He really is just a turtle hiding in his shell. This shell of his is so hard. TSK, TSK, TSK. Similar to what we had seen in the mortal plane, Imrudalorcan finally came out to greet us in the basic form of a stone giant. In the mortal plane, his form had made people feel somewhat internally conflicted upon viewing him, but the current Imrudalorcan's appearance made everyone feel helpless on how to comment. Unlike his pitch-black outer shell in the mortal plane, Imrudalorcan's stone giant body seemed to be constructed out of precious white jade, which seemed exquisite yet frail to the point that just a casual touch it would shatter it. However, the fact that just his very steps were causing the ground to sink doubtlessly proved that his extravagantly beautiful heavy armor of white jade was of a scarily high quality. The forbidden spell was still sending out waves in the elemental tide, and he rushed furiously in our direction. All the obstacles along his way were viciously sent flying. He ignored all spells and projectiles. Without a preliminary glance, anyone would know that the stone giant before us was definitely a tough one who would be difficult to even scratch. But this was also within my expectations. Once his direct route of charging towards us was basically confirmed, of course we would activate the trap we had long since prepared for him. Realm of flowing water. The plentiful preparations beforehand reached the conditions necessary to bring enough water element here for the water elemental goddess to activate her own divine domain. A river suddenly descended from the sky, causing a mud-filled flood to cover this entire land. The sand and water created a muddy flow that seemed solid but was actually flexible. The moving sand and rocks were far more difficult to deal with than the flood itself. Sinking into it would mean that even thousands of kilograms of strength wouldn't be sufficient to pull yourself free. This was a trap created by nature, and had absolutely nothing to do with magical resistance. This was a death trap created just for Imrudalorcan, who had peerless physical strength. When Imrudalorcan got trapped in the mud flow, he struggled fiercely at first, but when he discovered that everything beneath his feet had turned into muddy water where he couldn't use his strength, he gave up resisting and allowed the muddy river to carry him with its course. Although he was now stuck, The fact that his eyes were still filled with the intention to fight us seemed to be telling me something. Even if you can trap me temporarily for the time being, so what? That was the self-confidence in his body's defense power. And he had every right to have such self-confidence. In all our combat extrapolations, that elemental god body of his built up over thousands of years had basically unbeatable defense. It had given us so many headaches. The water elemental god's divine domain was extremely limited here, and the mud river would quickly lose its momentum. But for us, this was sufficient. Frigid ice river. The descent of ice caused the river to instantly transform into a frozen river as the newly formed ice solidly trapped Immortal Lorcan within. Right after this, the remaining demons were already beginning to attack him. At this moment, Immortal Lorcan's reinforcements as well as those looking to cheaply gain the accomplishment of slaying a god all descended upon him. Die, Immortal Lorcan! The furiously roaring wind elemental god Cambion transformed himself into a storm giant and was intending to engage in melee combat with Immortal Lorcan in a repeat performance of the combat situation from the underground labyrinth. Roar! Before he even reached Immortal Lorcan, the frozen Immortal Lorcan broke free from his bonds and sent a white jade-like huge fist that was even faster than Cambion's roar. Boom! There was no magic involved at all, it was merely a full force blow. Yet Cambion's body was already shattered. When he reformed his physical body from mist at a nearby location, he was noticeably smaller than earlier, evidence that he was definitely injured. The wind elemental god had overestimated himself. In the mortal plane, he was still able to exchange a few blows with Immortal Lorcan, but in this earth elemental plane, Cambion was the one who was weakened while the earth elemental god was now using his true body. Plus, Immortal Lorcan's power was multiplied even further in his home plane. The power gap between the two was massive. Another reason that Cambion's body was shattered in a single blow was that as a mage class, he actually went out and tried to engage Immortal Lorcan, the pure warrior, in melee combat. In the end, it was still him underestimating his opponent. He used his past experience to measure Immortal Lorcan's true strength and ended up suffering mightily with just a single exchange of blows. But to me, none of this was that important. From the very start, I didn't consider the possibility of killing Immortal Lorcan using any sort of frontal attack. Getting him stuck here was enough for me. Bai Feng, you're up. Do a good job for me in digging up his ancestors' graves, and don't leave behind even a single stone. Just as I finished speaking, Bai Feng's reply caused me to feel uncomfortable all over. Relax, with me going out there, I promise I won't leave even a single mouse or cockroach behind. I had always wondered about a certain question. Why was it that such normal sounding words would always make people feel uncomfortable when he was the one saying them? And, right now, on the outskirts of the battlefield, the escaping giant sandworms were blocked by a certain smiling half-dragon legend-ranked hunter, who was already beginning to use his super charisma against certain targets. Soon, those restless huge beasts actually began listening to Bai Feng's command, for only the reason that he told them there was one thing that could help them gain freedom and become even stronger. Our target is, to not have any cavities in our teeth. Adam was joking and messing around even at such a time. No. The elemental throne. Dig it up for me. There's going to be no more Earth Elemental God for at least the next 2,000 years. We're going to make this bastard lose his foundation and become homeless. I angrily shouted and pulled out my longsword as I watched the combat situation unfold in front of me.